Good morning, everyone. I now call the first hearing of the task force on the attempted assassination of Donald J. Trump to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess of the committee at any time. In consultation with the ranking member, we have agreed to operate the task force in accordance with the rules of the House, including the 5-minute rule. We hope that all members will agree to continue to be respectful of each other and abide with the decorum of the House as we investigate the issues at hand. I now recognize myself for my opening statement. On July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania, 20-year-old gunman Thomas Crooks came within inches of assassinating the former president and current Republican presidential nominee, Donald Trump. I will also say that in this room today, outside of local law enforcement, there's only one other person that was on the grounds that day, with my wife, with 3 of my grandchildren, and 1 of my sons. I can't tell you, when I talk to local law enforcement, how much I appreciate what you all did that day, and today is your day to come forward with your testimony. Now, I, along with several members of my family, we were actually present at the rally in Butler when this shooting occurred. It's my hometown. I've lived in this community for more than 60 years. I grew up going to the Butler Farm Show because we, at one time or another, did farming, and we would take our animals there every time we had the farm show, and also played American Legion baseball at the fields beside the farm show. So this tragedy remains incredibly personal to me and to the entire community. This tragedy, the very real threat to democracy of our nation, escaped that day. I think we realized it was entirely preventable. But because of failures by the Secret Service, the shooting was not prevented. Just last week, Acting Director Rowe said his own agency showed complacency. The day of the assassination attempt, Crooks scouted and identified weaknesses in the Secret Service's security plan using both a drone and a rangefinder. Had security vulnerabilities not existed, it is entirely plausible he might not even have attempted the shooting and would have returned home. Unfortunately, we will never know for sure. What we do know is that the documents and testimony point to several fundamental failures on July 13th, in the days leading up to the rally. It was not a single mistake that allowed Crooks to outmaneuver one of our country's most elite group of security professionals. There were security failures on multiple fronts. To date, our investigation has identified 3 key factors. First, Secret Service planning, or perhaps more accurately, their failure to adequately plan created confusion among the agency's law enforcement partners. The Secret Service was not assertive on key decisions, like the placement of some of the units and delegating responsibilities. Secondly, the Secret Service did not close down public access or manage access to the grounds next to the rally site that were less than 150 yards from the stage where former President Trump spoke. Third, the security communications and command structure were not cohesive and did not allow for rapid decision-making. Information in a moment of crisis went through radio communications, text messages, and phone calls way too slowly. Secondhand reports were passed in a manner resembling the old children's game telephone. Altogether, these other failures led to a dysfunctional security situation that took the life of Mr. Comprador, injured 2 others, and nearly claimed former president's life. I will add to this what's not in my script. There was another life that day that was lost. The Crooks family lost their son. So whatever role he played that day, we must remember that at the end of the day, I believe this all could have been prevented. Now, in the hours leading up to the assassination attempt, Crooks had a prolonged and unimpeded ability to scout the target and identify the most advantageous shooting positions. Even as Crooks was flagged multiple times for suspicious behavior, confusion surrounded law enforcement's responsibility to find and question him. Crooks operated in an unsecured area, as situational information about him was both delayed and limited. Former President Trump took the stage even as local law enforcement were escalating efforts to find a suspicious person. Evidence shows that in crucial moments after local police over radio reported that Crooks had a long gun on the roof, and in a period of less than 30 seconds before shots were fired, the Secret Service could not process the information fast enough to pull the former president from the stage. I am going to do something here, but I think, Lucas and Sarah, that we believe the same thing. All we had to know, if we knew there was a suspicious person out there, and I think once you listen to this today, you're going to find out, why in the world would you let former President Trump go out onto that platform if you weren't sure it was secure. That's the whole purpose of why the Secret Service was there. Thankfully, President Trump survived this near-death experience. Mr. Comprador did not. Exercising his patriotic right to participate in our democracy, he was not able to complete that day. And I want you to know something. The Comprador family, on Saturday morning, July 13th, were so excited to leave their home in Sarver as a family, Mr. Comprador, his wife Helen, and their 2 daughters, to go to Butler, Pennsylvania to watch our candidate speak. 4 people drove over that morning. 3 people went home that night. Mr. Comprador lost his life that day. That is totally unacceptable in America. Today's hearing brings forward 3 witnesses who were at the rally aiding the Secret Service effort on July 13th. These men are the first individuals who helped provide security at the July 13th rally to testify before Congress. They are here to give their accounts of what they saw and experienced both at the rally and in the planning process leading up to it, the key being the planning process leading up to it. I do expect they will share enlightening information about mistakes and regrets, but also about heroic and selfless actions taken by local law enforcement that day. It's important to remember that these men and their units were not in charge of July 13th, nor did they have a hand in designing the Secret Service security plan. Those responsibilities belonged to the Secret Service. These men answered a call to play a role protecting the public and our political process, even though providing security at a political rally is not their usual line of work. Our country already knows what happened at 6/11 on Sunday, July 13th in Butler. The law enforcement professionals with us today are here to tell us about specific actions and events that led to this outcome. Testifying today, we also have the medical examiner who performed the autopsy on Thomas Crooks. He is testifying to answer questions about how Crooks died and to hopefully put to rest some theories and doubts that often seem to follow high-profile violent events. Finally, our panel includes a distinguished retired Secret Service agent who played no role in the events of July 13th and is on this panel to provide insights into Secret Service protocols and practices. After this hearing, the task force will use what we have learned from today's testimonies, additional documents, and local law enforcement resources in the next phase of our investigation. In this next phase, we will be seeking answers about the Secret Service's questionable decisions regarding planning, resources, and the apparent lack of leadership that led to complacency and vulnerability on July 13th. Since the task force added its first staff in August, following a unanimous 416-0 vote by this House of Representatives to establish this panel, we have led a thorough, fact-based, and bipartisan investigation. Our duty, as expressed in the resolution establishing the task force, is to investigate and present a report making recommendations by December 13th that address the Secret Service's security failures. This task force is fully on track to fulfill our duty. This hearing is not our last word or conclusion. It is a window for the public to see our important ongoing work. Finally, I want to take a moment to address former President Trump, who after September 15th has now decided in two assassination attempts, he's going to return to the Butler Farm Show on October the 5th. I want to personally commend the former president and his family for the incredible strength they have shown since July 13th. I can't imagine anybody looking at this and looking at it, and please separate the politics from all of this. This is a United States citizen running for a political office. He has a wife, he has children, he has grandchildren. Nowhere in our whole scope of government can we accept the fact that these people jeopardize or put their life in danger by running for a public office. It's totally unacceptable. I think he's owed a lot better than what he got that day, and also we're going to be looking at Florida. But we've been warned about these clear threats to his safety twice. It's the obligation of this Congress, this administration, and public servants at all levels of government to stand against those who would use violence to interfere with our elections. Every American should be outraged, regardless of who they intend to support, by these attempts to nullify their votes through violence. We use ballots, not bullets, to make a determination of who should serve. Today's hearing is the task force's latest attempt to seek accountability and answers on what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, and to restore the faith, trust, and confidence the American people deserve. One last thing before I recognize Ranking Member. Jason Crow and we have I think, for whatever reason, we're put in the same place at the same time for the right reasons. I am going to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from Leader Scalise granting us permission to have one of our witnesses testify remotely today, and without objection, so ordered. I now recognize the distinguished ranking member from Colorado, Mr. Crow, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman, and I want to start by thanking all of the witnesses for coming here willingly on your own time to provide really important information for this panel and for the American people as we seek answers that they need. Political violence has no place in our democracy, period. We must be united in our belief as Americans, not as Republicans or Democrats, that political disagreement is settled through rigorous debate, not violence. That is why this task force's investigation and today's hearing are so important. Since the establishment of this task force just 2 months ago, I have worked closely with Chairman Kelly to ensure that this investigation is and remains bipartisan. The members of this task force and our staffs are coordinating closely to ensure that we establish the facts of the security failures of July 13th so that we can help ensure that those failures never happen again. It is our hope that today's hearing will provide the public with critical insight into our progress. The Secret Service is a critical dual mission. First, the protection and investigations to ensure the safety and security of protectees, key locations, and events of national significance, and the investigation of crimes against the U.S. financial system committed by criminals around the world. Its protection mission operates, by the Secret Service's own admission, on a zero-fail mentality, as it must. While numerous other state and local law enforcement agencies were present leading up to and during the July 13th event, the Secret Service is ultimately responsible for the safety of its protectees, a mission that the Secret Service has had full-time since 1902. It is clear that the Secret Service failed on July 13th. It is also impossible to ignore, however, the fact that the world has changed dramatically since the Secret Service first took over full-time presidential protection in 1902. Political events are bigger. There is a significantly greater number of protectees. Access to information about protectees' movements are more accessible to the public. Times have clearly changed. The Secret Service must be expected to accomplish its zero-fail protection mission without any errors. But Congress must also ensure that the Secret Service has the resources it needs to accomplish that mission. It has become apparent since July 13th that the Secret Service is stretched too thin. It takes years to create a Secret Service agent qualified to protect the president or a former president. Right now, there are simply not enough Secret Service agents. As a result, the Secret Service must rely heavily on Department of Homeland Security agents and other federal agencies whose responsibility may not primarily be personnel protection. The Secret Service also relies heavily on local and state law enforcement, particularly with large-scale events like July 13th. In the first part of this investigation, it has become clear that local law enforcement played a critical role in security on July 13th, and efforts by individual local law enforcement officers may have saved lives and prevented a far greater tragedy. It is also clear, however, that the communication between the Secret Service and local and state partners was disjointed and unclear. For example, there was no single command post for all law enforcement on site to receive and relay information. Given how critical the partnership is between the Secret Service and local and state law enforcement agencies, clear lines of communication are crucial. The Secret Service must do better. This task force has a solemn, urgent responsibility: uncover the failures and help stop them from being repeated. The American people deserve clear answers about what happened on July 13th. This hearing will provide the first pieces of what we learned, but make no mistake, this investigation is still early days and there is much more to do. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses and learning more about their perspectives on what happened, what went wrong, and how we might prevent these failures moving forward. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
I'll now introduce our witnesses. Today we are joined by Mr. Edward Lenz, who serves as the commander of the Butler County Emergency Service Unit. Commander Lenz is also a sergeant with the Adams Township Police Department. On July 13th, while working for Butler ESU, Commander Lenz was stationed in the local command post at the campaign rally site. Next, we have Mr. Drew Blasco, who is a patrolman for Butler Township Police Department. Patrolman Blasco is also a sniper team assistant leader for Butler County ESU. On July 13th, while working for Butler Township, Patrolman Blasco was stationed with a Secret Service agent where former President Trump's motor car arrived. Our third witness is Mr. John Harold, who is a lieutenant for the Pennsylvania State Police. Lieutenant Harold was the officer in charge for the Pennsylvania State Police on July 13th. Next, we have Mr. Patrick Sullivan, who has served over 40 years in federal law enforcement. He began his career at 18, working for the FBI. Then he joined the Secret Service as a special agent, where he served 23 years, retiring as a supervisor. Though he is retired and was not present on July 13th, he served on the Secret Service Presidential Protection Division for 4 years and conducted numerous advances, both domestic and foreign. His expertise will be helpful in context of how the Secret Service works with local law enforcement to ensure the safety of all protectees. Last but not least, we have Dr. Ariel Goldschmidt testifying remotely. Dr. Goldschmidt is the Chief Medical Examiner for the Allegheny County Office of the Medical Examiner. Dr. Goldschmidt conducted the autopsy of the would-be assassin, Thomas Matthew Crooks. We appreciate all of you for being here today. Before recognizing the witnesses for their testimony, I would like to remind them that their oral testimony is restricted to 5 minutes in length. If you see the light turn red in front of you, it means your 5 minutes have concluded, and you should try to wrap up your testimony as quickly as possible. Will the witnesses please stand and raise their right hands? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that all the witnesses answered in the affirmative. I now recognize Commander Lenz for his 5 minutes opening remarks. Commander, thank you for being here today.
Good morning. My name is Edward Lenz. I'm a patrol sergeant for the Adams Township Police Department in Butler County, Pennsylvania, and the commander for the Butler County Emergency Services Unit. I was the commander of the local tactical units operating at the Butler, PA presidential rally on July 13th. Butler ESU was initially requested to assist the U.S. Secret Service at the Butler rally by providing 2 counter-assault teams and a quick reaction force. Later, 2 sniper teams were added to that request during the planning process. We were assisted at the Butler rally by the Beaver County Emergency Services Unit, the Washington County Regional SWAT Team, and pre-hospital staff from Allegheny Health Network. Beaver ESU provided a 2nd armored vehicle with a counter-assault team and 2 police snipers. Washington Regional SWAT provided 4 tactical operators and 2 police snipers, and Allegheny Health Network provided an EMS physician and a paramedic to assist the tactical EMS providers already embedded with our teams. Across the 2 counter-assault teams, the quick reaction force, the 3 sniper teams, and support personnel, we provided a total manpower of 44 persons, exceeding the number requested by the Secret Service. At no point during the planning process was Butler County ESU asked to secure the AGR complex, nor the perimeter surrounding that area. At no point during the planning process was Butler ESU asked to deploy a sniper team to the roof of the AGR complex, and at no point in our operations plan did we ever say that we would deploy a sniper team to the roof of the AGR complex. From their positions inside the AGR building, the snipers were not able to see the roof where the shooter was located, and again, that was not within their area of responsibility. Butler County is our home. Some of those attending that rally were our neighbors, our friends, our families, our coworkers, and in fact, my wife was one of the paramedics embedded with our team at the rally, and she provided treatment to those that had been shot. Each and every team member took their job serious and their responsibilities serious. Illustrative of this, a member of the QRF had observed several suspicious persons in the area of the AGR building, one of whom ended up being the shooter. This information was relayed to uniformed patrol officers assigned to post along the perimeter and was discussed with the snipers posted inside the AGR building. A Beaver County sniper in the AGR building was able to take a photograph of the suspicious male while he sat near the AGR building, and again later saw him using a rangefinder pointing towards the stage. And this information was promptly reported to the Pennsylvania State Police in the Secret Service Command Center, the Butler County Sheriff's Office, and the Butler Township Police Department. Had these officers not picked up on this suspicious behavior, we likely would not have known anything was wrong until shots were fired. Prior to those shots being fired, an operator from Butler ESU had exited the red barn behind the stage and was monitoring the AGR area due to the suspicious person reports. When shots rang out, he was able to quickly identify where the shots were coming from. He observed the shooter, he shouldered his rifle, he acquired his target, and he fired one round at the shooter, which caused the shooter to recoil and briefly fall out of sight. He did this less than 6 seconds after shots began, using his short barrel M4 platform rifle chambered in .556 with an EOTech weapon sight at a distance of approximately 110 yards. He remained on target, prepared to engage with additional rounds, and as the shooter slowly came back into sight, a Secret Service counter sniper fired a round striking the shooter, ending the active threat. No other rounds were fired by the shooter after he was engaged by the Butler ESU operator. Since July 13th, we have cooperated with multiple investigations, and our members have been interviewed by the Pennsylvania State Police, the FBI, the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, the Secret Service Mission Assurance Investigators, the Homeland Security Independent Review Panel, Senator Grassley's office, and of course, this House Task Force. We have done so without subpoena, and I am here today without being subpoenaed. Butler County ESU has nothing to hide, and we will continue to cooperate, as I believe the American people deserve the truth. The events that occurred at the Butler rally are nothing short of a tragedy. Evil will always be a threat, and we must continually review our own actions, adjust our operations, and constantly strive to achieve perfection, though we will never achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander Lenz. I appreciate it. And I know how heartfelt this has been for you and how gut-wrenching it has been for you because we talked right after this. That's the purpose of today's hearing. Local law enforcement has gone through way too much. So we're going to get to the bottom of it. The work you did today was exceptional. Thank you. I'm now going to recognize Patrolman Blasco for his 5-minute opening remarks.
Good morning, members of Congress and of the task force. My name is Drew Blasco. I'm a patrol officer with Butler Township Police Department and assistant team leader of the sniper unit with Butler County Emergency Service Unit, as well as a veteran of the U.S. Army. Please let me begin by stating that the place where the deadly events of July 13th unfolded is my home. I was born and raised in Butler Township, Pennsylvania, and I've regularly attended the annual farm show on those very grounds since I was a child. The Butler Township community is sacred to me and to the members of the police community with whom I serve. Many of our families and friends work in Butler Township, and our police force works very hard day in and day out to ensure their safety and to maintain the peace and safety of all who come into the township. The events that ultimately played out were horrific and tragic. A man lost his life, his family lost a husband and a father. People's lives were changed forever. I had the unique perspective of wearing 2 hats for this rally. As an ESU member and assistant team leader of the sniper unit, I took part in some of the planning meetings, which included interaction with the Secret Service. On the day of the event, I worked as a Butler Township officer, assisting with traffic control to ensure that the roads and intersections were clear for the arrival and departure of the motorcade. I would like you all to know that I, my fellow township officers, and ESU team members are committed to doing all that we can to help prevent similar tragedies from taking place in the future. We have voluntarily participated in numerous interviews with state and federal investigators, including those of this task force. We have done so to be transparent and to do what we can to help make political rallies and public events safer, and most importantly, to prevent the lives from being shattered whenever evil men are determined to pursue evil deeds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blasco. Now recognize Lieutenant Harold for his 5-minute opening remarks. Lieutenant Harold.
Chairman Kelly, Ranking Member Crow, and members of the House Task Force. I am Lieutenant John D. Harold of the Pennsylvania State Police, and I proudly entered the State Police Academy in 2005. And I have been a supervisor since 2013. I was the officer in charge of our personnel at the Butler Farm Show site on July 13th rally for former President Donald J. Trump. The officer in charge has overall supervisory responsibility for the PSP assets assigned to the detail and I performed those duties, including visiting each PSP post to ensure the assignments were clear and they had adequate resources. I also took part in planning meetings for the rally for former President Trump with Secret Service and local law enforcement, as well as preparing PSP's operation plan for the Butler Farm Show site. I appreciate the opportunity to join you today to discuss the event as it pertains to the state police. The state police is a full-service police department composed of 4,562 sworn members, 1,616 civilian employees providing various law enforcement services to communities and local, county, regional, state, and federal partners. The state police operates independently from our local partners and works together with full and part-time local enforcement agencies, but we do not have administrative or operational oversight over local law enforcement agencies or county sheriff's office. We have always and will continue to work with our local enforcement partners at local and federal level to protect public safety. Secret Service is the lead agency at events involving its protectees, and PSP routinely provides resources and personnel to assist. As a matter of protocol, the Secret Service advises the state police that an event is anticipated, followed by a joint meeting and site visits. On Friday, July 5th, the Secret Service notified PSP that the former President Trump a rally would take place in Butler. On Monday, July 8th, I and other commanders from PSP attended the initial planning meeting with various law enforcement agencies. I visited the site multiple times and completed a PSP operation plan leading up to July 13th. The Pennsylvania State Police provided all resources requested by the Secret Service. The Secret Service did not ask me, as the officer in charge of PSP assets, to post a trooper at the AGR International property, nor am I aware that Secret Service making that request to any other PSP official. 30 members of the state police were assigned to various roles to support the Secret Service. These members provided escort for the motorcade route, staffed post within the secured perimeter, performed roving patrols, and staffed the Secret Service command post. PSP was not responsible for securing the building or property at AGR International. The Secret Service established and managed the primary command post for communication. In the office of the Butler Farm Show, a PSP sergeant under my supervision was stationed in the Secret Service command post to relay information or any communication made by PSP personnel to our local and federal partners. I thank you for this opportunity to provide information about the actions of the state police in planning, staffing, responding to the tragic events at the July 13th rally, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Lieutenant Harold. I now recognize Mr. Sullivan for his 5-minute opening remarks. Mr. Sullivan.
Chairman Kelly, Ranking Member Crow, and distinguished members of the task force, I am Patrick Sullivan, retired Secret Service agent with 23 years of service. I am honored to appear before you today. I'm a life member of the International Association of Chiefs of Police and the Fraternal Order of Police. I'm also a board member of the United States Secret Service Association. I'm speaking for myself this morning as a subject matter expert. The information that has come to light so far regarding the security failures in Butler is shocking and infuriating. However, I am very, very proud of the bravery of the agents who put themselves in harm's way to save former President Trump and the skill of the counter sniper that neutralized the incoming gunfire with one shot. I served as a Secret Service agent in many investigative, protective, and supervisory assignments. Make no mistake, the Secret Service cannot function without the assistance of its state and local law enforcement partners. I truly believe the men and women of the Secret Service have the most difficult and unforgiving job in law enforcement. It is a zero-fail mission. I have the utmost respect for those agents, uniformed division officers, and staff who are currently facing the challenges. For a presidential visit, the Secret Service must provide 360-degree coverage to include the sky above and the ground below. The Secret Service establishes an inner, middle, and outer perimeter. I will now discuss a typical Secret Service advance for a presidential visit in the United States. Prior to July 13th, what follows was only provided for the president. It's my understanding that these advance procedures are now being used to protect President Biden, Vice President Harris, as well as former President Trump. The President's staff informs the Secret Service about the date and location and itinerary for a trip. The protective detail then notifies headquarters and the Secret Service field office where the visit will occur. The field office then notifies the relevant state and local law enforcement agencies and schedules a police meeting. It is at the police meeting that the state and local law enforcement agencies meet the Secret Service advance team and learn about the trip. Counterparts for the Secret Service advance team and local police are identified. The Secret Service advance team usually consists of the following: a lead advance, site advance, airport, motorcade, protective intelligence, counter-assault team, counter-sniper team, magnetometer, counter-surveillance unit, and technical advanced components to include unmanned aerial surveillance. After the counterparts are identified, the police and Secret Service work together on their assignments to develop a security plan for their site. They will jointly determine the assets needed to secure the site. The Secret Service personnel doing the CAT and counter-sniper advance will also work closely with the local police SWAT personnel to craft a tactical response plan. The Protective Intelligence, or PI advance, works with the local police and other federal agencies to investigate any threats or threat-related information. The site agent, in consultation with the lead advance agent, reviews the site security plan and presents it to the field office supervisor and protective detail supervisor for concurrence. The lead advance agent is responsible for ensuring all protection activities are coordinated and in sync. This includes ensuring all components communicate and respond appropriately during an emergency. Usually there will be one overall command post for the visit, with each site having a security room, a scaled-down version of a CP. The Secret Service lead and site agents do not have direct command or control of the state and local police officers. Off-the-record sites are handled differently than most on-the-record movements. The Secret Service does not know the President intends to visit a location until shortly before. The Secret Service will have a site agent conduct a brief advance to ensure that there are no apparent security concerns. Additional security measures are put in place after the President arrives. In closing, I would like to suggest Congress consider expanding the statutory authority of the Secret Service to ensure the agency can make the most informed decisions possible. The United States is facing a hyper-dynamic threat environment, and the Secret Service must be certain it is receiving all relevant threat information. The failure of most Secret Service personnel in Butler to be informed about the specific threat facing former President Trump stands out. Currently, there is no statutory requirement mandating federal, state, and local agencies must report to the Secret Service information concerning threats against the President or other protectees. There are agreements in place and memorandum of understanding to allow the transfer of such information, but no legal mandate to do so. In my opinion, the law must clearly state such information must be immediately provided to the Secret Service to take whatever steps it deems necessary to conduct an investigation and follow-up. For example, the FBI has exclusive jurisdiction to investigate a conspiracy to assault or kill the President before the attack takes place. Since the Secret Service is responsible for protecting the President, it should be part of all such threat investigations so it can take appropriate steps to prevent an assassination. And finally, the FBI has authority under current law to seek the assistance of any federal, state, or local agency, including the military, to help investigate an assassination or assassination attempt after the fact. I believe the Secret Service should have similar authority to call for such assistance to prevent an assassination or assassination attempt. That concludes my statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I now recognize Dr. Goldsmith for his 5-minute opening remarks. Now, the witness is going to be testifying over the phone, right? Okay. Dr. Goldsmith, please.
Good morning, Chairman Kelly, Ranking Member Crow, and distinguished members of the task force. My name is Dr. Ariel Goldschmidt. I'm the Chief Medical Examiner for Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. On July 13, 2024, after the attempted assassination of former President Trump, I, through my staff, reached out to the Butler County Coroner, Bill Young, to offer our assistance if needed. Later that night, our assistance was accepted by Butler County, and arrangements were made to transport the bodies of Thomas Matthew Crooks and victim Corey Dean Comparator to our office. Our office wasn't involved in the transportation of the decedents. However, once they were transported to our office, the required chain of custody work was processed. The following morning, July 14 at 9:15 a.m., I began Mr. Crooks' autopsy with the assistance of other technicians named in my report. Prior to the autopsy, the body was x-rayed. Major handprints were obtained by the FBI Major Incident Program Manager, Brian Johnson, and gunshot residue test samples were collected by autopsy technician Lauren Moran. My involvement in the case was limited to the autopsy, in which I determined that Thomas Crooks died as a result of a high-velocity gunshot wound to the head with an entrance wound of the left upper lip. I had no reports from or involvement in the investigation into Mr. Crooks's motives or actions, crime scene evidence, or other outside evidence as part of my work. Items of evidentiary value collected during the autopsy were transferred to the custody of the FBI. Once I received the results of toxicology testing, which was performed by our laboratory, I completed a written autopsy report, which was signed August 5th and delivered to Butler County. Our office's involvement in the case concluded on July 22nd, 2024, when Mr. Crooks's body was released to a funeral home pursuant to the directives of the Butler County coroner.
Thank you, Doctor. Now we're going to move to member questions under the 5-minute rule, and I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. First, we're going to show a video to get things started. The footage you are about to see is from this dash cam of a Pennsylvania State Police patrol car on July 13th. This footage has never been released to the public, and it has been edited to show relevant parts. The video, as you will see from the timestamp in the upper right-hand corner, begins at 18:08 or 8 minutes after 6 p.m. In the first 12 seconds of the video, you will see a figure circled in red crossing the roofs of multiple AGR buildings. This man is Thomas Crooks. You will then see the patrol car begin moving toward the AGR buildings, and we lose sight of Crooks, but about 19 seconds into the video, he reappears. Again, we have circled him in red before we lose sight of him at about 20 seconds later. Now, we cut the video for length so it picks up at about a minute and a half later at 6:10 p.m. and 38 seconds. Here you will see law enforcement around the AGR building. At this point, all law enforcement entities staffing the rally are aware that there is an individual on the roof of AGR, but they do not know he is armed. Behind the trees, you will see one officer attempting to lift another officer up onto the roof, and you will see that officer pull himself up and look to the left. According to that officer's interview with the task force, he sees Crooks with the long gun, and Crooks turns and points the weapon in his direction. The officer then falls to the ground, injuring his ankle, and radios that the man on the roof is armed at 11 minutes after 6. That portion of the video ends here. We know that the first shot from Crooks is fired just 32 seconds later. We will play the video now. This will take about 51 seconds. There's no audio. Where do we see Crooks run?
We already did. So we're lifting the officer from the roof now. It's hard to see.
Yeah. I realize it's hard to see some of this, but so Crooks, as he makes his way across the roof, this is, by the way, a Pennsylvania State Police cruiser, and it has the dash cam. So you're able to see some things that nobody else was able to see, but I know it's difficult. Lieutenant Harold, I'm going to direct the first line of questioning to you since this is state police footage. Footage and evidence show that Crooks was on the roof of the AGR building for over 3 minutes before shots were fired. Lieutenant Harold, please describe those few minutes leading up to the shots fired from your vantage point.
My position when the shots were fired, I was behind the stage. I can't answer to any questions regarding Mr. Crooks on the roof because I did not have that information. I was behind the stage. It was very loud, and if it was transmitted over our portables, I did not hear that. But I had returned to my car briefly once the former president had taken the stage to retrieve a cell phone that had FirstNet, and then I was returning back to the stage when the first shot rang out.
Officer Blasco, same question.
At that time, I was at Brady Paul, and I was working my way over to the AGR building to assist other Butler Township units with looking for crooks. As I got to the water tower, I parked underneath the water tower and began to make my way to AGR. That's when the shots rang out.
Thank you. Commander Lenz, you were reportedly the first person to call out shots fired over the radio. Were you aware that someone was on the roof or that he was armed prior to the shots being fired? Also, please describe those few minutes leading up to shots fired from your vantage point.
For the first two questions, yes, I was aware through radio traffic that there was somebody on the roof and also that he was armed. The first report that there was somebody on the roof came on a different radio channel than the tactical units were operating, which would be PD Ops 3. And that transmission at 18:08 and 20 seconds is somebody's on the roof. At 18:09, I made a phone call to the PSP sergeant in the Secret Service Command Center and relayed the information that there was a suspect on the roof of the AGR building. There was some additional radio traffic from the Butler Township police units, and at 18:11:03 hours on that PD Ops 3 channel, again, not the channel the tactical units were operating, is the Butler Township unit that reports he is armed. I believe he says, I see him, he's laying down, and he has a long gun. So my actions for that, at that point, the gentleman on the roof clearly is a threat, and I radioed to our quick reaction force to deploy them to the AGR complex to begin to address that threat. Prior to me finishing that radio transmission, you can hear the shots being fired through my open microphone.
Okay. You know, I have a problem going back to the actual sighting of Mr. Crooks more than once and way, way before 11 minutes after 6. I think that one of the things is the panel has heard from different people at different times is of the thousands of people that were on the grounds that day, there is repeatedly one person that keeps standing out in the back and forth, all the different communication. And it is, in fact, Thomas Crooks that they're talking about. So we knew there was somebody that was very suspicious. We also knew there was somebody that we weren't able to actually come in contact with, and we kept losing contact with him. We saw him with a rangefinder. We saw him doing things that were not probably in line with what people go to a rally for. And I think that I'm constantly going to be wondering at what point did somebody say, we're not sure the area is secure and safe? There's enough understanding before that. The way you all responded, I think, was incredible. I want to thank you for that, but I still can't understand of all the different people that were on the grounds that day, thousands of people, there's only one consistent person that they identify, and it is ultimately the shooter. So I don't believe the grounds were safe and secure that day. I'm just trying to understand is what it was or what it would have taken for somebody to say, keep Mr. Trump inside until we clear this up. Well, Commander Lenz, because you and I have had not just minutes but hours together, and a couple of days we'll be gone a deep dive to what happened. Do you feel that the Secret Service adequately prepared you and your men for July 13th?
I believe I can answer the tasks that they had given us, which would be to provide 2 counter-assault teams, 2 sniper teams, and a quick reaction force. We were certainly prepared for the missions that they had given us. There were additional things, obviously, that probably needed covered, but they never asked us to do that. They never tasked us with that. So given what they specifically asked us to do, we were certainly prepared to do that.
Okay, so you did what they asked you to do. But looking back at it now, the question is, did they clearly identify what it is that they expected of you or what you could have been responsible for? Mr. Blasco, same question.
So I took my direction from Commander Lenz, and of the things that we were asked to do from my direction from Commander Lenz for the pre-planning stages for the sniper teams, I would feel that I did what was requested of me from Commander Lenz.
Okay, so hindsight's always 20/20. Looking back on that, do you think you were adequately prepared for what it is that ultimately happened?
There's always things that you think that you can do better, but with the information that we had, I believe that we did the very best that we can, or we could.
Lieutenant Harold, you feel the Secret Service adequately prepared you and your men for the event?
The Secret Service, after meeting with them at the site and going through what they requested PSP to do, was primarily the security of the farm show inside the fence line. So adequate troopers, I had 30 troopers inside that fence line once the motorcade arrived. And I feel that with them being the lead and we were in a request assist function, we provided what they asked for and we secured the inner perimeter of the farm show grounds.
Yeah, I think with local law enforcement, I think you did everything that you were tasked to do that day. But looking back and looking at the game films and say, you know what, there probably were other things we should have been clued in on from that. Just ask all of you, when did you first meet with Secret Service and understand what your role was going to be that day? Looking at July 13th and working backwards from that Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, when did we get together to find out what we should do that day?
For Butler ESU, our first contact from the Secret Service was Friday, July 5th at 1:55, and that was a phone call asking for assistance with the upcoming Butler rally. We then had a police planning meeting that was on July 8th, 2024 in Allegheny County, and during that meeting is where they relayed the information specific to their request. And at that point for Butler ESU, that was 2 counter-assault teams and a quick reaction force.
Commander, tell me, where did that meeting take place?
I believe it was the Allegheny County Emergency Operations Center. I could not be there that day. I was actually teaching an active shooter class in Erie, and one of our deputy commanders went to that meeting.
Okay. Mr. Blasco. Yeah, I will.
So again, we took, from that meeting, we took direction from Commander Lenz and the deputy commanders and team leaders, and we started to formulate a plan of what to do. But the first interaction that I personally had with the Secret Service would have been the July 11th walkthrough at the farm show grounds.
Actually on the site?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that was my question. I know that you were in Allegheny County when they're getting ready for this, but who actually walked the site, saw what it was that needed to be done, and had determined a lot of things, including where the perimeter should be? I would think that would be I would supposedly that there would be a lot of coordination between the local law enforcement, the Secret Service, and Homeland Security, who visited that day, to prepare for that event. I want to thank you all for being here today in your testimony. I'm now going to have Mr. Crow has his turn.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Sullivan, I wanted to start with you for a moment. I served in the Army before coming to Congress, and one of the principles of operations, as Mr. Blasco, I'm sure, is familiar, is you have to have unity of command and you have to have effective communications. Without unity of command and effective communications, a unit cannot operate. So one of the things I'm struggling with is this idea that there wasn't a single unified command station on site. The Secret Service did not establish that. Is that atypical in your experience? Would there normally be one command and control station to unify command and communications?
Yes, that's very atypical. I am very surprised. Normally, there will be an overall command post for the entire visit. Then each site will have what's called a security room, where radio traffic pertinent to that individual site is controlled. And the command post, the overall command post, should be the state, local police, Secret Service, and other federal partners that may be assisting. So this is very unusual that the way it turned out here at this site.
Do you have any sense in this instance as to why that might occur? Are there instances where when you're conducting an event, you would do multiple command posts, or can you not see why that would be the case?
Well, it's a misnomer, Congressman. The multiple command posts, the Secret Service always has security rooms at individual sites, and they may be termed a command post, but it's really a mini command post. There should be just one overall command post. Then each site has their own kind of communication center where information relative to that site will be transmitted. For example, the airport agents or security there really are not concerned what's happening at the other sites because they're only concerned about the airport. So there'd be a security room just for the airport site.
It's probably safe to say that, time and speed is really important, right? Because the idea behind that, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but the idea behind that is if there's something identified as being wrong, a suspicious person, that has to be very quickly communicated, right?
Yeah, this is how it should happen. The protective detail is on one specific frequency, Secret Service frequency, and only the protective detail is on that frequency. The post standers are on a second frequency, and the tactical teams are on a third frequency, but the other tactical teams monitor all three frequencies at the same time. So if something happens, it's at the security room's responsibility to immediately get on the radio on the details frequency and say, there's an issue, remove the protectee from the stage or cover and evacuate. That's what's supposed to happen. And that's what's drilled into every Secret Service agent. There has to be, because the detail agents, don't forget, they can't listen to all the other traffic. They have to be rock solid on protecting the president or the presidential candidate. So their frequency is just for their individual movements.
So in this instance, based upon what you know and what you heard from Commander Lentz and Mr. Blasco, a suspicious person was identified with a rangefinder. Pictures were taken of this person moving around a building, so much so that it drew the attention of one of the sniper teams who took pictures of it. If that information had been effectively communicated to the FBI, or if the FBI, I guess to rephrase that, had set up a communication system and a command post to receive that information, would that have been a situation where you would say the protectee shouldn't go on stage until we resolve this?
Congressman Crowe, you mean the Secret Service, not FBI?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, Secret Service, right.
Yes, sir. What should have happened, in my opinion, is when the suspicious person was identified, the detail leader and the shift agent should have been told there's an issue, we're working a suspicious person. And then at that point, it was probably would be inappropriate to remove the president from the stage, but the detail leader should know there's an issue, I may have to react quicker. So at a minimum, when there's a suspicious person, the detail leader and the shift agent should be told there's an issue.
And in your experience, have there been situations when you've been on service as a Secret Service agent where that has come up, where you've had to, pause an event or respond to something until it's been addressed?
Yes, that has happened during my career. I've never had a dramatic situation where we had to remove the president from the stage, but we've had situations where the shift agents are told, we got a situation, there's a suspicious person in the front row. And then you have to mitigate that. Usually the protective intelligence team will then come, take that person and conduct an interview, remove that person from the rope line, as an example, and you don't have to take the president off stage or interrupt the president's movements.
I want to turn briefly to the effective deployment of snipers. So Acting Director Rowe explained to this task force that it is best practice for the Secret Service to position counter snipers from the vantage point of the protectee looking out. And in fact, in this situation, that is where the Secret Service sniper teams were. They were sitting above the platform looking out. The employment of the local law enforcement, the Butler County ESU sniper teams, was outside looking in. So not looking at rooftops, not looking at lines of sight or lines of fire, but their mission, as they were told, was to look at the crowd, and a crowd of several thousand people, and to try to identify issues within the crowd. Is that atypical?
I don't know, Mr. Crowe, if that's atypical. I'm very familiar with the our counter-sniper operation, Secret Service, and that they do set up their position for a line of sight to the stage, show a potential assassin, what type of shot can a potential assassin make against the president, and counteract that. Generally speaking, the observation of the crowd is the responsibility of the post standers or police officers that are posted in the crowd. Because the theory being, everyone in that crowd has already been screened. So it would be very difficult for someone to get a weapon inside the secure area already.
So the idea that there would be, a gunman, not to say that it's not impossible, but there would be a gunman in the crowd, that a sniper at a distance would be able to identify and take an effective shot seems very unlikely.
It seems highly unlikely, in my opinion. Again, the threat at that point, from the counter-sniper perspective, is outside the perimeter, in the area that is outside where the magnetometers are set up. And that's the reason why you have the counter-snipers. Because the theory being inside that perimeter, the people have already been screened, and to a high degree of certainty, there is probably no weapons inside the secure area.
Thank you. Commander Lenz and Mr. Blasco, did that mission seem unusual to you, that you were outside looking in at a screened crowd?
It did not. We didn't receive any direction from the Secret Service as far as how they wanted our sniper teams to deploy or what their actual mission would be. So our snipers on our normal missions, they deploy more as marksman observers. So they
what was your mission as you understood it that day?
As we understood it, it was to deploy sniper teams to overwatch the stage, the crowd, the venue area where most of the people would be gathering.
Mr. Goldschmidt, are you still with us?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Just one brief question for you. Was the autopsy that you performed, was that, in this case, was that a standard autopsy in your view? And what I mean by that, was there anything that stood out to you as unusual or different? Was there anything in the toxicology that stood out to you as unusual or different, or did it all appear to be a standard autopsy?
It was a standard autopsy. The only thing that would be different was we did a little bit of extra toxicology testing with a heavy metal screening with a slightly elevated lead level. But other than that, the fact that there were FBI members and Pennsylvania State Police members present, it was a standard autopsy.
And pictures were taken during this. It was documented. So, any markings in the body, tattoos in the body, that would all be evident from your report?
Correct.
And so slightly escalated lead levels, but nothing else that stood out.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. And now I'm going to recognize Representative Joyce from Ohio for 5 minutes. Mr. Joyce.
Thank you very much, Chairman Kelly. Lieutenant Harold, a lot of discussion, I think, will take place today about the advanced planning that took place. And my understanding is that from your testimony here was that you were involved in most of those day-to-day meetings leading up to this event and at the event with the Secret Service. Is that correct?
Sir, yes, sir.
And so could you go through that, like, on what was the first day you met with them, and what did you discuss? And did the Secret Service, to your understanding, when they come in and take over a site, they're in charge of the site, and then they're helping, you are assisting them, and they're telling you, you tell them where people are gonna be, the local folks who are they're going to be, and they're basically in charge and know all those things ahead of time, where everyone's supposed to be, correct?
That's correct.
Did you have the opportunity then to understand that when the Secret Service came in, that they were telling the local folks, this counter sniper group, and I believe Mr. Blasco, that it was at the end of the day, it was the Beaver County sniper team that was in the HR building?
It was both Beaver and Butler, sir.
Okay. Did Secret Service ever talk to the Beaver County sniper unit?
Not to my knowledge.
And they were there that day in charge of this operation. Secret Service never talked to them?
Correct.
Thank you. So going back to you, Lieutenant Harold, the day of or day before the event, do you have a walkthrough with the Secret Service?
I had 2 walkthroughs at the site. There was a walkthrough on Tuesday. It was just a brief to get familiar with the property. We went back to the barracks. We pulled up an image of the farm show on a smart screen TV. We drew the fence line, spoke a little bit. The main meeting at the site was Thursday, and it was with the same 3 Secret Service agents. I was with 2 other PSP commanders. We walked the site starting at the main gate We went clockwise around and looking at my ops plan, wherever there's a dot or a number, that was a stationary patrol. And then basically when we got near the end and I had everything that they had requested, I was informed by my Area 1 commander that if we needed additional troopers, that we could pull from surrounding troops. But after the request and the assignments that was given to us from Secret Service, I had plenty. I covered all the posts, and I had additional roving troopers inside the venue. So that was primarily the main meeting that we had with Secret Service was on Thursday, and then I completed the ops plan and had it forwarded out by 1,500 hours on Friday.
So that was 2 days before the event, no walkthrough the day of, no walkthrough the day before?
There was no walkthrough. I spent a little bit of time there Friday evening. There was an incident between Secret Service and the campaign. I was on my way home. I live across the street from the farm show, so I stopped there to see what the issue was. I ended up staying there until about 8:30 p.m. that night. So I did have some other interactions with Secret Service there on Friday, and then even some early communication with the campaign and Secret Service the morning of and during the event on July 13th.
What was the issue?
The issue was there was a campaign. We didn't know who it was at first. There was a vehicle that was parked, and one of the Secret Service agents had approached this person, and I think the individual was rude to the Secret Service agent and then got out of the car and walked away. So I had a trooper there go up to the PA system, page the registered owner of the vehicle, and I gave them so many minutes to return to their vehicle or I was going to tow it.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Sullivan? Were you ever personally on a presidential protection detail?
Yes, sir, for 4 years.
Okay, when was that?
It was 2 years with President Reagan and 2 years with First President Bush.
Oh, God bless. What kind of training did somebody on a PPD have?
We had extensive training. We came through the normal Secret Service training, Federal Enforcement Training Center, the Secret Service Training Center in Beltsville, Maryland. Then, before you got to the presidential detail, you had to do a series of field office assignments, investigations, and protection assignments, assisting on advances. And then when you got to the Presidential Protection Division, you had to have a minimum of 6 or 7 years experience, which is what I had when I got there. And then once you're there, we had training at least once a month. We had to shoot our firearms once a month, and we went to Beltsville, the Riley Training Center, at least once a month for, we call them attack on principles, AOPs, where you'd go through routine and events that might happen, then all of a sudden you'd have an attack on the person who was acting as the president to test your response skills. So it's very, very intense training.
I appreciate that, sir. Our acting director Rowe has said that we need a paradigm shift, and we need to be changed from one of being reactive to one of readiness. Now, what does that even mean?
Well, I think it means that the Secret Service needs to shift how we do business, but I'll harken back to my testimony. To me,
Like shift, from back to all the work that was done to prepare you for President Reagan and President Bush to the lack of that work being done now?
no, sir, that's not what I mean. I think there's a certain, I don't know what words are actually come to mind, but agents are exhausted now. The campaign really, really takes a lot out of them. And I think they don't have enough resources, Secret Service does not have enough personnel and resources to give people the breaks that they need. But also, let me say though, Congressman, when we say about the paradigm shift and going from a reactive mode to a readiness mode, it's really being proactive. And I'll harken back to my testimony. We
So
need.
when would you not be proactive when when you go out into a situation like that? You're always looking for points of attack, correct?
Yes, from the physical protection aspect, but I'm talking the overall agency.
I'm talking about the physical protection. When you were in PPD, when you were out there on the field, if you saw somebody in the line of sight or the day before in a walkthrough and you saw problems with line of sight, what would you do?
I would have had those mitigated, or else I would have talked to the supervisor and said, it's not safe for the president to come.
Correct. How would you mitigate it?
You could have banners, you could have buses, you could have trucks. There are a lot of ways to mitigate it. But however, to me, the simplest way to mitigate the building there outside the fence line in Butler was to post it. If you had police officers on the outside of the building, or agents, no one could have got up to the roof.
my understanding is that there was some type of vehicle that was supposed to be posted there to block that line of sight. When you came out and you were in charge and you didn't see the vehicle there, you still let the president come out?
Well, I didn't do the advance, and I don't want to
I
second
know,
guess the
I know,
people
but
there.
I'm asking you, since you're here on their behalf, I'm asking, you
Mr.
would
Joyce?
have let the person come out?
Mr. Joyce, I would have taken the steps necessary. If I thought there was still a gap in the security posture, I would have taken the steps necessary, or I would have told the supervisors it's not safe to bring the president here. That's what I would have done.
Mr. Joyce?
Thank you very much. I know I exceeded my time.
I wish we had a lot more time to do this. I mean it because I think you're onto something that we really need to know.
I'm not a
Mr. Priya, you
chairman,
are
so I
now
don't get
recognized
extra
for
time.
5 minutes. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to welcome our witnesses today. You're all real-life heroes, and you acted with bravery on July 13th, and for that, I thank you on behalf of the American public. I'm also grateful that former President Trump was not seriously injured, but several families were. Their lives have been changed, and for them, I have nothing but my deepest sympathies. Mr. Sullivan, I want to turn to you first. I have a Wall Street Journal article from yesterday, and I'm going to submit this for the record, Mr. Chairman.
Objections.
And quickly summarizing some of the statements were made. Unclear chain of command, technical issues, poor communication, couldn't identify who within Secret Service was final decision maker, no communication in real time, 2 communication centers. Secret Service said they had technical issues with the radios, a problem that was characterized as being common with the agency. This is a summary of the Senate findings. And Mr. Sullivan, I just want to ask you a very brief question, which is, who's in charge at these sites?
It is crystal clear in my mind from when I was an agent. The site agent, the site advance agent, crafts his or her plan, presents it to the lead advance agent. Ultimately, the lead advance agent is personally responsible for signing off on the entire advance package, all the sites, airport motorcades.
So I'm going to ask you, you have at least three different elements here, 3 different groups that we're talking about here. We're talking about the Secret Service, local police, and the campaign.
Yes.
So the Secret Service is in charge
Secret Service is in charge
of all the above.
of security. No, not all the above, not the campaign, Mr. Carrera. It's only charge of the security portion.
And I say that to you because some of the testimony here today, first of all, we don't have communication was totally lacking here. You mentioned there was one command center is generally the situation. Here you had 2 command centers that didn't talk to each other. You had someone in the roof spotted, 1609, call was made, suspect on roof with a possible weapon. 1811, local police officer spots crooks, jumps off the roof, injures himself. 32 seconds later, you have a shot, goes off. Real time. You've been with the Secret Service, sir. You with President Reagan, I believe you said.
And President Bush, yes, sir.
Thank you for that good work. What went wrong? Who's in charge? And I'm not trying to say focus on you, but rather we have former President Trump going back to Butler here in the next few days. I'm not looking for people that are guilty here. I'm looking for solutions. What went wrong? How can we fix that moving forward?
Well, what went wrong here is there was a breakdown, and I'll explain one more time, Mr. Carrera. The site agent reports to the lead agent. The lead agent is responsible. He or she is responsible for the entire advance package, and then that's presented to the field office supervisor and the detail supervisor.
Are we being lax here? Because Secret Service is an elite group of Americans, done an excellent job of protecting our presidents. And here today, you described to me, who's in charge, at least for the locals and Secret Service and not the campaign, but is there somebody there who has the authority to say, this doesn't look good, pull the candidate off the stage, this situation is beyond my control, or it doesn't look good, cancel this thing, move to a safer ground? Is there somebody there that has the authority to tell all three elements, this is not good, let's move on?
Yes, the side agent and the lead agent, before the protectee gets there, could call ahead and say, it's not safe, do not let the protectee arrive. Absolutely. Once the protectee's there, if there's an issue, any agent, you don't have to be the detail leader, any agent can
I'm
go up.
running out of time, so very quickly, my last question would be, did that person in charge also review all of the communication and say, this is not working?
Yes, that was the lead
Pull the
agent's
plug.
responsibility. The lead agent,
And so there was a failure there by the lead agent.
well, I don't want to specifically say the lead agent, but
In
in
your-
my opinion, it was probably the lead agent's responsibility to ensure the overall communication for the entire visit was appropriate.
And that was not the case.
Apparently not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Correa. Now recognize Representative Walz for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think I share everyone's condolences for the Compatore family, for the Copenhaver family, for the Dutch family that are dead and suffering because of these failures. And thank you all for your service. Every day you wake up and put that badge on to keep us safe. We appreciate you and we have your back. And I just want to let you know, as a veteran, when we come home, we depend on all of you, and I just can't thank you enough. Commander Lenz, Lieutenant Harrell, I want to take a step back again, back to the planning. And really the threat profile that President Trump is facing that is unprecedented in modern American history. Commander Lenz, Lieutenant Harrell, were you made aware that Iran has ongoing assassination plots against President Trump that are active and ongoing right now as we speak, including to the run-up?
No.
To July 13th?
I am not aware.
Was it ever discussed with you that an Iranian operative has transited Venezuela and was in the United States, according to FBI public notice made in March, recruiting hitmen to kill President Trump?
It was not.
Were you made aware on July 13th or on July 12th that day the FBI had arrested a Pakistani national, Mr. Merchan, with ties to Iran, putting down payments, actual cash, down payments to recruit hitmen?
No.
Were you aware that that same operative were recruiting women as spotters and recruiting protesters as a distraction? A fairly sophisticated plot being run by a foreign state actor intelligence agency.
No.
Not aware.
Mr. Sullivan, in your experience, would that change how you operated? Would that heighten your level of coordination, assets?
Absolutely, Mr. Waltz. It would be a tremendous game changer. But again, I hearken back to my statement here at the beginning. The current situation with the Secret Service not being mandated to have information provided to it is a problem. Now, the Secret Service should have been part of that overall investigation. The Secret Service should have been part
Secret
of the
Service
arrest.
should have been aware.
Absolutely.
And
They probably
certainly,
were.
had you been in charge, or in your experience, would certainly make local law enforcement aware, hey, we not only have ongoing plots, we just arrested someone in the United States putting down payments to kill President Trump. This is on top of the ongoing domestic threats, correct?
Yes.
You would
Yes.
make your counterparts aware.
Yes, I would think those Secret Service headquarters knew about that. I'm assuming that. I don't know for a fact. But I've been in law enforcement my whole life. Unless you're in the room, unless you're one of the persons putting handcuffs on the suspect and bringing him in the room conducting the interview, you're never going to get the whole story. You have to be
But at
part
least
of
an
that
awareness,
arrest.
in fairness, just I have limited time, at least an awareness to your local law
Yes,
enforcement, right?
yes.
So were you also aware, was anyone aware that President Trump had been denied additional resources, but the reason the Secret Service counter sniper team wasn't there to coordinate with you is they were still pending approval at Secret Service headquarters. That's why the actual counter snipers weren't there to coordinate with you. Was anyone aware of that?
I was
But
not.
that they would be coming, maybe you should sync up, coordinate?
There was some discussion there. like I think it was on Thursday, that, because when you compare this to the 2020 rally, the Secret Service did not have a lot of the resources that was in Butler for 2020. And this event on July 13th, they seemed like they had a lot less resources. There was no CAT team. I don't think the CS team was coming at first.
That's right.
And early on, we had mentioned our CERT team, which is Special Emergency Response Team, utilizing them, but they felt that they were just needed in the motorcade.
So it was clear, heightened threat, you're not made aware, a lot less resources from the service. In addition, in terms of Secret Service post standards, 12 were allocated to Dr. Jill Biden's event in Pittsburgh, only 3 allocated there, making them highly dependent on you all. And in my time remaining, Commander Lentz, you said you were not given any guidance to secure the AGR building. Can you just talk about that for a moment? So essentially the site and the advance said, locals, you guys got this. Good? And was there any back brief? Was there any put assets here, on the roof, inside, post standards, anything at all?
So once we received our duties, so the Secret Service says, here's what we want you to do. And on Tuesday, I believe it was Tuesday, they did request some sniper teams from us, and later that day confirmed that their counter snipers were coming in. But there was no guidance as far as where they wanted us to be, aside from what those specific duties would be. The counter assault team leader was very good at making sure we knew what was expected. The counter sniper walked through with us at the planning meeting, so they knew where we would be. They knew what our plan was. They never requested a formal copy of our plan.
This was all verbal,
Correct.
right? And you never got any written guidance of how many assets to put where?
Correct. And it was our decision to place those snipers in the second floor of that AGR building. They were aware of that, certainly aware that they would be there, but there was no feedback or guidance that they wanted them there, that they didn't want them there. But really, by not raising an objection.
And Mr. Sullivan, should that guidance have been provided? in your
Absolutely,
experience?
absolutely. No question about it.
And if you had had additional Secret Service assets, would you have put the AGR building within the protective perimeter and the see-through chain link fence that anybody could have approached within yards of the stage? Would you have put that inside the perimeter with additional resources?
With additional resources, you could probably put that building inside the perimeter, but from my understanding, with the resources they had, the decision was made to put that building outside the perimeter. But it still could have been secured with post standards to prevent someone from getting on the roof.
So this was a lack of resources decision from Secret Service headquarters. If they had had it, you would have done it differently.
No, Mr. Walsh, I don't want to say that. I wasn't there, but if the Secret Service had the resources, it would have been easier probably putting that within the secure perimeter, and then everyone going into the building would have already been magged and screened. But, I mean, you have to take that on a case-by-case basis. Every site's different.
But at this point,
Thank you.
you
Mr.
could go.
Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. You could go up to that fence without being magged or screened.
Yes.
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Dean, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank all of you for coming and being willing to assist us in trying to get at the facts of what happened, what went right, what went wrong. And I offer you my thanks for your service to community and to country, but I also want to say I'm sympathetic to your losses that day and the stress and trauma that it put on you and the entire community. I had the opportunity, I'm going to ask that the map be brought up. I and many others on this panel had the opportunity to do a site visit at Butler. Is that okay? Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, you don't have to hold it. Excuse me 1 second. Where's AGR? Right here. And what struck me, and I think most of us, was the proximity of the place, how close everything was as we walked into that field and looked where the stage would have been and just looked to our left, the double fence line, very open double fence line, and then these buildings. So I'm going to start with you, Officer Plasko. And again, I thank you for your service to our country and of course to the community that week and that day and continuing. Officer Blasco, this set of buildings at the top here, they're adjoined buildings, there's a separate building, there's a parking lot, there's a wooded area. What we see at the top, is that the AGR complex?
Yes.
Okay. How far are the AGR buildings from the red barns behind the stage, which I don't think are shown here? Red barns were here.
They are approximately 130 yards.
130 yards, okay? Is it your understanding that the AGR complex was left out of the secure perimeter by Secret Service and the plans in the rally, outside of that which was established by Secret Service?
Yes, that was our understanding of it.
You said, well, I know you were on the ground on the 13th in a patrol capacity, and your thoughtfulness of moving in so quickly is admirable to me. But you were there at the planning 2 days earlier, is that correct?
Yes.
On the 11th? Is it true that within minutes of joining the walkthrough on the morning of the 11th, you shared your concerns about AGR complex not being secure? Again, here's the top where Crooks was positioned and dies, and shoots from and dies. You shared your concerns about AGR complex. With whom and what did you say?
I did share my concerns with the agents, from my understanding, that were in charge of the site that day. I explained to them that the snipers inside that building were overwatching the venue itself, and that the whole area, specifically the whole area leading up from the water tower, we had no vantage point from. We could see part of the building that Crooks was on, but we had no access or line of sight, I should say, to that area. And I asked the Secret Service members that we do not have the additional manpower to post anybody there, and I requested additional people to be posted there so there would be no access to those grounds.
And what response did you get?
That they would take care of it.
They would take care of it?
Yes.
And did you think that meant they would put it within their secured perimeter?
Whether they put it within their secure perimeter or they posted bodies, actual people there, that was my expectation of what was going to happen.
And I want to point out, for the benefit of those who haven't been there, this is a fence line for the AGR property, is that correct? And it's a chain link fence,
Yes.
so you can see through it.
Yes.
And this property, AGR property parking lot, was not locked down. People could walk in and did walk in,
Yes.
including Mr. Crooks. This is another chain link fence, I believe, with just the grassy perimeter.
Yes.
Did they say anything about posting an agent or blocking, making opaque that fence line or both fence lines?
So we were told that they were going to post a opaque fencing along the line. In the military, I called it sniper fencing, but it's an opaque fencing that you can't see it. It's a green fence that what I know it to be, that all the way around the outside of the perimeter.
Mr. Lieutenant Harold, can you talk about whether or not there was a discussion about posting vehicles along either of those fence lines? Farm vehicles, trucks, buses?
On Thursday, well, even on Tuesday and Thursday, there was discussion about farm equipment that they were going to post. It was the campaign that was going to post farm equipment. And at one point, it was along the pond side of the stage, and then they were discussing about putting some farm equipment up above between the stage and the AGR building. So there was also a contact that was provided to the campaign about a resource that would be able to provide additional equipment to banners, trailers, some of the same equipment that was utilized in the 2020 rally. And so I had put the campaign in contact with this individual, so if they needed additional equipment along that fence line. And then there was also some discussion about, I think it was like, I guess you would say a jumbotron or something, like there was supposed to be a screen of some sort, like blocking that area a little bit better. Saturday morning when we showed up, I think there was one combine that was between the AGR building and the stage, and there was a few additional tractors that was on the opposite side, on the pond side of the farm show there from the stage.
And Commander Lentz and Mr. Blasco, when Secret Service arrived, did anybody say to you all, well, we're missing some of the stuff we thought was going to be here, to block that line of sight?
When I arrived the day of the rally, I actually did not speak to anybody from the Secret Service until I had to make a phone call to the Secret Service specific to a possible threat that the 911 center received.
I thank you. I recognize I've gone over, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Again, I'll just go to thank you for your service, and it is stunning, the proximity of that rooftop and all of that property. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. Mr. Fallon, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lieutenant Harold, how long is the academy that you attended to become a Pennsylvania State Trooper?
Approximately 6 months.
And during that 6 months, how much time was spent on personal protection training or providing security at political rallies?
Very little.
Yeah, if not any, right?
Right.
Would that be the same, Commander Lenz and Officer Blasco?
Correct. There's,
Similar?
to my knowledge, none in the police academy.
Agent Sullivan, when you went through the academy training, was it 6 months like it is now?
The first school was 12 weeks at Glencoe, Georgia, and the second Secret Service was about 16 weeks.
Fair to say that about 5 to 6 of those weeks were spent on how to secure perimeters and things like that at political rallies?
Yes, it was
And personal protection?
the vast majority was protective intelligence investigations, protection.
Roger. And then when you actually went on a protective tour, it's about 5 or 6 years? That accurate?
You'd have to be an agent for at least 5 or 6 years before you could be assigned to protective detail.
Right, but a protective tour lasts about 5 years or so?
No, when I was an agent, it was between 3 and 4 years,
Okay, it's about 5 years now.
or more, yes, sir.
So fair to say, I think we've established that the experts in protection are the Secret Service and not local law enforcement. You do a lot of other things. To illustrate for the American people the abject historical failure of the Secret Service, because they're supposed to be the premier protective agency in the world, and on July 13th, they were anything but. And Helen Comparator doesn't have a husband because of that. So when I visited the Butler farm, the Butler farm show and the AGR complex, 2 things struck me. The absolute, that proximity of the AGR building to where the stage was and where President Trump was speaking. And also, when you're on the other side of that very limp chain link fence, how much, I'm shocked at how many people were milling about that didn't go through any magnetometers or any security checks. Officer Blasco, do you have any idea how many people were on the grounds that day on the AGR
On the
property?
AGR complex?
Yeah.
From talking to the sniper units in the AGR building, they said there was approximately 150 to 200 people.
Okay, so there were hundreds there. All right. And so, let me ask you this. Is the AGR property, it's outside the security perimeter, but there were hundreds of people 50 yards closer to the president than the shooter. We didn't know who they were. Commander Lenz, what's the highest structure in the direct proximity of the AGR building?
The roof of the second floor of the AGR complex.
But in the water tower.
In the water tower, yes.
The highest one. Did the Secret Service ask you all to post anybody up on the water tower?
No, they did not.
Okay. Would that have helped perhaps secure the area and mitigate the threat of the AGR building if we had somebody up there?
I think it would help secure the AGR complex.
Because you had a clear line of sight on it if somebody was up there, right?
Correct.
Yeah. But they didn't do that, did they?
They did not.
All right. Commander Lenz, as far as the walkthroughs, did the Secret Service perform a walkthrough with you all?
They did.
They did?
On Thursday, there was a police walkthrough.
Okay. And during that walkthrough, did they help you and advise you as to how to secure the AGR building?
They did not.
They did not. Lieutenant Harold?
Our walkthrough was Thursday, and AGR building was not discussed.
Wasn't discussed?
Yeah, we were inside the fence line of the farm show, and we picked they picked their stationary post where they wanted troopers assigned within the perimeter, and the AGR building was never discussed.
Okay, so we could have surrounded that building with, say, 8 or 10 officers, and it probably would have mitigated the threat the AGR building presented. Fair to say?
Yes,
And the Secret Service didn't ask you to do that?
no.
Okay. How about just clearing the area entirely? It's about 17 acres, but only about 4 or 5 of those acres have line of sight to where the president was speaking. Did they ask you to maybe put up some stakes around the perimeter, police tape, no trespassing? They asked you to do that?
No, I knew AGR, I knew the parking was restricted that day. The business was not going to allow parking, but there was nothing, no other communication regarding the AGR.
If the property, if the AGR property had been cleared with police tape and some, don't trespass and nobody other than law enforcement walking about, would that have helped secure the area and mitigate the threat of the AGR building presented?
No, it would have, but like I know that they were going to sweep the farm show, so I'm not sure if that area was swept by Secret Service or not. I have no knowledge of that.
We know that there were hundreds of people that didn't go through any security checks that were milling about on that property that day. Could
Outside
have
the
presented
fence is
a grave
correct.
threat, and we just got lucky in that regard.
Yes, sir.
Do you think that, I'd say, Lieutenant Harold again, were law enforcement stationed on the roof of the AGR building? Did the Secret Service ask you to put people on the roof?
PSP was not asked to put anybody on the
Okay.
roof of the AGR.
Commander Lenz, were you asked to put anybody on the roof?
We were not.
Officer Blasco?
No.
No. But if there had been law enforcement on the roof, probably wouldn't have had a shooter on the roof. Fair to say?
True.
Yeah. How about drones? Agent Sullivan, to the best of your knowledge, were drones deployed that day to help mitigate the threat that the AGR complex presented?
Mr. Fallon, having not been there, it's my understanding they weren't. The Secret Service had some technical issues with the drone. That's my understanding from public knowledge.
Lieutenant Harold, if cameras had been placed on the AGR roof, would that have helped mitigate the threat?
That would have.
Where the Secret Service didn't place any cameras to your knowledge, did they?
Not aware of any cameras on the roof of the AGR building.
There's about 7 different ways the Secret Service could have secured that building. A 10-year-old looking at that satellite image could have seen that the greatest threat posed to the president that day outside the security perimeter was the AGR building and that roof. And a 20-year-old with a week's notice figured it out and outsmarted and outmaneuvered the entire U.S. Secret Service. And that is a shame, and it's a stain on their agency. And the best way to prevent these from happening is you don't react to them, you prevent them in the first place. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. Ms. Houlihan, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us today. I want to join my colleagues in thanking you for your service. I, too, served in the military, and so I'm enormously grateful for the safety and security that you provide all of us when we're home. My questions are going to be focusing primarily on communications and radio protocol, and so I'm confident or somewhat confident that I know to whom to direct these, but if you have any insight or input into it, please feel free to chime in. I want to start with Mr. Sergeant Lentz. Understand that you are the commander of the Butler County Emergency Services Unit, and as commander, my understanding is you were in the local command trailer, along with your deputy commander and representatives from the Butler County Sheriff's Department and the Butler Township Police Department, as well as, of course, the emergency services on that day. Meanwhile, my understanding is that the Secret Service security room included representatives from the Secret Service, from the state police, and also from the Butler County Emergency Services. Just to start, is that a fairly accurate portrayal of who was where then?
Yes.
Perfect. Can you describe then some of the radio frequencies that were used by those various agencies? And I'll start with the Butler Police Department. What frequencies were they operating under?
Sure. So the Butler Township Police Department was using a channel we call PD Ops 3, which was an operations channel just for the township units performing traffic control duties. The tactical police units, we were using PD Ops 4, and the sheriff's office was using the sheriff's operations channel.
And my understanding there were also frequencies 1 and 2 for units that were not working at the rally as well. Is that correct?
Correct. PD1 is for patrol units that would cover the southern part of the county, and PD2 would be the northern part of the county.
And were local officers able to listen to other radio frequencies that day, other than the ones that you just outlined?
No. So we were able to hear our Butler County channels only.
And could you talk a little bit about the state troopers as well? What frequencies were they listening to?
The only thing I can really speak to on the state police radio is we did have one in the county command post. It was a portable radio. But the newer radios seem to operate more like a cell phone, and if you don't have a connection to the tower, then they just don't work. So we had some issues hearing anything from that radio throughout the day.
So you had issues communicating with the state police, and my understanding is they were on a different radio system from you.
Correct, and they are on a separate radio system. I'm sure Lieutenant can echo better what they actually were using.
Do you know if the Secret Service, again in a different area, was able to listen to your local radio frequencies that day?
So there would have been an encrypted police radio in the command center. I believe it was being used by the emergency services side, so fire and EMS. But I believe they treated around 250 patients for heat-related stuff that day. So that radio was nonstop. So even if that radio was scanning and had the capability to hear our channels, they would not have been able to do so just because of the amount of traffic on the
Yes, when we were in Butler, that was my understanding, is that there were a couple hundred calls because it was such an incredibly hot day, and that, to your point, even if they had been able to listen to you, there was a lot of other chatter going on. And so, here we've got the local folks, the sheriff, the state police, all of whom have their own channels, and not all of whom are able to listen and hear to one another. Can you briefly talk a little bit about the Secret Service and whether or not you think they could hear you?
I do not believe they could hear us at all. They did not have a radio from us, and we did not have a radio from them. So, in the local command post, there was no way for us to hear any of the Secret Service radio traffic.
So for those of us who are of a certain age, I was in my early mid-20s during September 11th. This was almost exactly what I remember being the problem in terms of responding to September 11th, that there were all kinds of really well-intentioned, very well-trained people, but none of whom could hear one another or communicate with one another. It feels as though we haven't made a whole lot of progress on that. In your view, what would have been a better way to have this communication?
Sure, it's not feasible to have everybody communicate on the same channel just because the amount of radio traffic. However, a unified command post, as we're all taught in many different FEMA classes, a unified command post solves that issue.
Yes, and I know Representative Crow started this conversation with sort of being aghast at the fact that there were clearly more than one command post, and that in some cases, my understanding is some people didn't even know that there were more than one command post, and so that's certainly a gap too. So here we were with 3 minutes and every second counting, and the Secret Service and the state police weren't able to directly hear what local law enforcement actually saw because they didn't have that interoperability with local law enforcement frequencies and didn't have possession of those radios. Given how important that communication is in communicating in a crisis, clearly one of the findings of our investigation ought to be that there needs to be certainly reform in terms of the technological communications that are going on here. My colleagues had a little bit of extra time, and with my remaining time, I'd like to ask a question about the drones. I understand that the drone technology that the Secret Service had didn't work that day. My understanding is that the person who was trying to assassinate the former president's technology did work that day. The last question that I have for you is we're always trying to solve for the last problem that we had, a shooter, a sniper. To me, we should be solving for the future problems that we aren't seeing coming around the corner, and those are emerging threats, evolving threats such as drone technologies. Gentlemen, do you have anything that keeps you up at night that isn't sort of the traditional sniper on a rooftop?
Yeah, I believe that we've probably all considered the emerging threat that would be coming from a drone. I would say at our level, I have no means to mitigate that at this point.
And that's actually something that we can also help with, and Congress has pieces of legislation, myself included, that address the authorities that you need to have to be able to combat what I think is an increasing threat from things like drones. I thank you very much for your testimony, and thank you very much again for your service. And with that, I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. The gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Lee, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for convening this important hearing, and to our witnesses for being here with us today. Lieutenant Harold, I would like to start with you and return to a comment that you made earlier. I believe you testified that you actually participated in a prior rally at this same area with President Trump in 2020. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you commented upon your observations about different resources that were available for that 2020 rally. Is that right?
That is correct.
Would you please describe for us some of the differences you saw in the level of protection and the level of resources that were afforded to President Trump in 2020 that were not part of the rally in 2024?
Well, first, it was the site. It was an airport that's located about 20 minutes south of the farm show. So it was an airport. It's completely fenced in. It's a restricted area. The night before, we picked up the motorcade and delivered the motorcade, I guess, or escorted it back to the airfield, and we parked it in the hangars there, and everything was secured. But there was no, I guess, the foot traffic. There's nobody walking through an airfield. You know, it's all fenced in. It's restricted. But it seemed like there was more resources that were present for the 2020 rally compared to the one here just 75 days ago. So when you think of like the level of security then, like what was changed now? Like why did we have less resources from the Secret Service on July 13th?
In your observation, did it appear that there were a greater number of Secret Service agents involved in the 2020 rally?
There definitely was, but it could have been because of the motorcade too. Like that, I mean, it was former President Donald J. Trump was the president then, so it seemed like there was more assets, resources, the motorcade, there was definitely more security at the airfield at the Butler Airport compared to the Butler Farm Show.
And Mr. Sullivan, I'd like to return to you for a moment. You testified earlier about very extensive and very specific training you received as a Secret Service agent before being put on a protective detail. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And I believe your testimony was that in addition to specific law enforcement training, you spent years in preparation and training before you actually were on that particular service.
Yes, Ms. Lee, that's correct.
Now, other federal agents who may be brought in to supplement Secret Service in a rally such as this, do they receive that kind of training?
No.
So we've discussed earlier that state and local law enforcement would not and did not have that kind of specialized training. But to be clear, it is also true that other federal agencies don't receive that specific training, that specialized training either.
Well, every agent that goes to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center Criminal Investigative Training Program does get an introduction to protection. They do get some familiarity with it. And then before when the Secret Service, I'm no longer there, but borrowed agents from other agencies. When I was an agent, we used ATF, IRS, Customs. Now it's Homeland Security investigators. They are briefed, and they get a briefing and a familiarization with Secret Service procedures. But remember, though, the agents that are helping from HSI are not doing the advance. They're not making decisions on how to create the security plan. They're in a specific post with specific post instructions for that post.
But would it be correct to say that Secret Service agents who are specifically assigned to a protective detail have far more extensive training in that specific type of service and law enforcement activity than would your counterparts at other agencies?
That is 100% accurate, Ms. Lee, yes.
And are there things in your observation about the particular rally today and the staffing associated with it? You touched earlier on how it's imperative to include state and local law enforcement, but are there particular things about this rally that you've observed that you think might have elevated and improved the security posture?
Well, again, Ms. Lee, I wasn't there. I'm just acting on the information I've received in public knowledge. I think there was clearly mistakes made. There were decisions that were not appropriate in my opinion, and I'm really appalled at the communications plan, or lack thereof. I can't fathom how that would be acceptable, and it's absolutely not acceptable.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, General Lee. Representative Moskowitz, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The assassination attempt against President Trump on July 13th was a chilling moment in our country's history. This task force is committed to ensuring that security failures on July 13th never happen again. We thank you for being here, gentlemen, to help provide the task force transparency and answers to the American people. There were a host of issues with planning and execution of the July 13th rally, including communications failures. I'm familiar with communications issues. As the former director of emergency management for Florida, I was the first emergency management agency to institute FirstNet for everyone in my emergency management agency and all of our CERT components. Additionally, I helped establish the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Commission after a shooting at my high school in Parkland, which also had radio throttling and cell phone issues, major communication issues where police departments couldn't talk to each other even though they were at the same site. Sergeant Lentz, were there cell phone issues on July 13th, and if so, what were they?
There certainly were. As more and more people started to arrive, it seemed that cell phone communications started to fail. I do have my cell service through FirstNet, so throughout the entire rally, I was able to make phone calls and send messages. But even in the command post, we were operating a mobile CAD and also a mobile radio platform that didn't have enough signal to actually operate. So we switched back to just using portable radios.
Right. And just for the edification of people watching at home, following the communication failures on September 11th, 2001, the 9/11 Commission recommended the creation of a nationwide communications network that would include priority and preemption capabilities for our first responders. FirstNet was AT&T, Frontline was Verizon, and those plans allow priority and preemption capabilities for first responders to prevent that sort of thing. And so, Sergeant Lentz, to your knowledge, did any law enforcement personnel who had access to FirstNet or Frontline on July 13th report issues with their cell phones? So Frontline or FirstNet people, did they have any issues?
To my knowledge, no, they worked the entire time. My pictures were a little bit slower to send, but they did go through.
Yeah. Which members of local law enforcement can access Frontline or FirstNet? Do local law enforcement departments provide those?
I do not know. So mine is actually my personal phone that I set up through FirstNet.
Right, so you have to pay for that yourself
Yes,
to have priority to make sure you can communicate.
yes.
Right, okay. At the July 13th event, a local sniper sent pictures of the shooter to other local law enforcement officers approximately 45 minutes before the shooting at 5:34 p.m. While some officers received those pictures, several law enforcement officers reported that they did not receive those photos of crooks due to connection issues. Sergeant Lentz, our understanding is that everyone who had FirstNet was able to receive the pictures of crooks. Is it your understanding as well?
Yes.
Okay. To your knowledge, were the local law enforcement officers on the ground in Butler on July 13th that had FirstNet or Frontline, were any of those unable to receive it?
Not that I've heard.
Okay. Would all local law enforcement having access to FirstNet or Frontline help improve communication issues at major events, in your opinion?
Yes, it's long been known that when you get a very, very large crowd of people, the cell system can only handle so much. At the 2020 rally, there was actually a FirstNet truck, I believe, that had been driven there and deployed as an additional cell tower, and I do not believe that occurred at this rally. But it does seem that the FirstNet is a very, very good option to make sure we have cell phone capabilities.
Right, so I just want to think about it, right? So the 9/11 Commission recognized this in 2001. We created a solution, and yet it's 2024, and we're still not implementing that solution at the highest levels of our security agencies to keep former presidents safe, for law enforcement on the ground who are a part of that, for Secret Service who is a part of that. And so, we don't have to sit here and come up with a solution. They did it in 2001. Why has it taken so long to implement the solution? And so, the chairman said something that's totally true. People in this country absolutely should have a right to go to a rally, right, and listen to their president or candidate of choice and come home. By the way, parents should have the right to send their kids to school in this country, right, and for them to come home as well. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. Now recognize the Chairman of Homeland Security, Chairman Green. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you and the ranking member for your leadership on setting up this hearing today in this investigation, and thank you to the witnesses. Colonel Christopher Paris, I think the commander of the overall Pennsylvania State Police testified before the Committee on Homeland Security a few weeks after the events in Butler and a few weeks before this task force was formed, that a photo was taken of the shooter with a rangefinder actually actively ranging the podium. He further testified that that image was texted to a PSP officer in the control center and showed to the U.S. Secret Service approximately 10 minutes before President Trump took the stage. Can you, Lieutenant Harold, confirm that that testimony is accurate to your understanding?
I have no knowledge of the image prior to or during the day of July 13th, so I can't answer to that. Like if it came up in the investigation, I had nothing to, or I have no working knowledge of the investigation, just the events that took place that day on the 13th.
You were on the ground there that day. So
Yes, sir.
this was reported to us in committee and under oath. I mean, you know Christopher Paris, good man.
I do.
Your boss.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Sullivan, you've been made aware, I know my colleague, Mr. Walsh, talked about the intel. Apparently, the additional intel was received about 21 days before the event. It was reported, as I understand it, to the Trump detail 7 days before the event. Considering this heightened intelligence, do you think allowing President Trump to take the stage after an image of an individual ranging the podium with an optical rangefinder is received 10 minutes before was a good idea or a bad decision?
Well, I don't know if the detail leader was told about that image being received. Had the detail leader been told about that?
PSP guy says it was shown by on a text. The phone said, "Here, this is the image of the guy, somebody ranging the target."
Yes, Mr. Green, I understand that, but that may have been someone in the security room, and that wasn't transmitted to the detail leader. I don't know if it was.
So I'm just asking, well, let me ask this question. Is it, like, if any Secret Service agent is aware of something like that, can any Secret Service agent go, "Hey, whoa, stop, we don't need to let the president on the stage"?
Absolutely.
Okay, that
Absolutely.
didn't happen. Okay.
But primarily it would be the detail leader's responsibility, but any agent could step in if she thinks it's an immediate emergency.
Okay, good. Commander Lentz, you mentioned that the local law enforcement activity fired the first shot. Is that correct? You mentioned maybe that he withdrew. Do you think he was hit, or do you think he just sort of ducked because he was taking incoming fire?
In speaking with the officer that fired that shot, he's very confident that his round was on target. And the way he described him, it wasn't a duck.
Is the doctor still available and online?
Yes, I am.
Were there 2 bullet wounds in this individual, or just one, the headshot?
No, it was just the one.
Okay. I just found it interesting that when we were briefed by the FBI, we didn't get told about that shot taken by the local guys. Lieutenant Harold, did Secret Service, the shooter apparently had the gun stored somewhere, as I understand it, near the AGR building. Did the Secret Service use canine teams to clear the site prior to the event that day that you're aware of?
Is that a question for me, sir?
Lentz, or you, sir, Commander Lentz, or?
I'm not aware of any canines clearing the area of the AGR international property. We were told that canine units would clear the farm show ground. So to me, I'm thinking inside the fence line at, I believe, 1100 hours that day.
Are you aware that happened, either of you, that did occur? You
I
saw
know
a
that
dog?
my officers did report that there were dog teams in the same barn as them.
Okay, very good. So you were testifying earlier, Commander Lentz. Did I understand you correctly that you're the leader of the local law enforcement on the ground there, right?
Just the tactical units.
Okay, the tactical units. The first time you talked to Secret Service that day was when you needed them and you called them?
Correct.
Did anybody check in with you to make sure your guys were in the right place for the event?
They did not check in with me, but
They did not. Let me make sure I got this correct. The U.S. Secret Service is about to pull a security detail around a president at an event with a lot of people and a lot of risk, with a heightened risk from an international threat, and they didn't even check in with you to make sure your guys were in place and ready to go?
Correct, not with me.
And you're the leader of one of the tactical units covering this and had responsibilities on this site.
Yes.
I find that unbelievable. Let me ask this question to both you guys, Commander and Lieutenant. What authorities did the U.S. Secret Service give you in the event that you saw someone with a weapon did you have first shoot authority? And was that very clear what you were to do under the circumstances if you saw an active threat like that?
They didn't provide any guidance to us. However, our standing orders with our team.
So you were using your protocols for that? Okay.
Correct. If it's a deadly threat, they do not need permission. They're permitted to immediately take action.
What about a step back from that? You got a guy with an optical rangefinder ranging a target. Did they give you any directions on what to do in those circumstances?
They did not.
How about you, Lieutenant Harold?
Yeah, I think the same thing with protocol. If we saw a threat, we would engage. When it comes to the rangefinder, I had no knowledge of that day of. During the same time frame, we were investigating 2 additional suspicious people that were on the fence line. And earlier when I said I was behind the stage, I had those 2 people in sight, and I was trying to get troopers to the location there for post 5 because he had saw what he reported as suspicious activity on the fence line. So we were also looking at that hearing the time frame, like about the same time that this information was coming in for crooks as well.
Well, I'll end right now just by saying thank you for the work that you do. We as veterans deeply appreciate the needle in the haystack that you guys have to live to find, and thank you for what you do. Really appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you, Chairman Green. Now recognize the gentleman from Maryland, Representative Ivey, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to join in expressing my gratitude to all of you, not only for being here, but the service that you provided to your communities and to the country. I wanted to follow up on a couple of things. One on the communications front. The FirstNet system, let me ask, because I don't know that Mr. Sullivan, you talked about FirstNet at all. Is Secret Service able to access FirstNet as well?
I do not know, Mr. Ivey. I don't know the answer to that.
All right. Do any of you know if on the day of July 13th, the Secret Service was connected to FirstNet at all?
I have no information of that, if they were or not.
In the walkthrough and the meetings prior to July 13th, were there any discussions about how communications would be had on the day of July 13th?
I know that Secret Service, when the county had referenced their mobile command post on Monday. So I think that's how that was integrated into the rally. So during Thursday meetings with Secret Service, the command post was established at the Farm Show office, the main office there coming through the main gate. So I knew that they were going to have, or Secret Service said they were going to have their representative there, and that's where we opted to put our sergeant in the command post with Secret Service. There were some communications with portables and the radios, but nothing with FirstNet cell phones.
All right, so we had communications with, Commander, you mentioned, I forget the name of the channel, but one of the channels that you used, right? You had people using cell phones, I guess for direct calls and for text communications?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, and then you had multiple other radio channels that were being used.
Yes.
Is that right? And some people were using FirstNet and some weren't. Is that all fair?
Correct, yes.
All right, and then you had 2 separate command posts or communication that had communications going through them. Is that right?
Yes.
So I saw a series of text messages, I think related to spotting the man on the roof who ended up being crooks. And it was texted because I guess the person who sent the text was uncertain that the radio communications would get to who they had to get to. So were you aware, Commander, that the text messages were being sent on July 13th?
I definitely knew text messages were being sent. In fact, that's how I got the picture of who we were looking for, so that I could then forward that to the state police sergeant that was in the Secret Service Command Center.
All right, and on July 13th, was there a way to relay that photo directly to the Secret Service using, I don't know, whatever electronic means that you were in connection with the Secret Service with?
I probably could have emailed it to them.
Email, okay.
However, the text message to
All right, but not exactly
police
the
sergeant.
emergency scenario that this entails. You see a man with, on a roof with a gun, a potential threat to the former president. You don't want to send an email. You want to let him know immediately, right?
Correct. And we did have a phone list for the different agents. However, I'd already been speaking with the sergeant in the command center for different things, and it was significantly easier and faster just to send it straight to him.
All right, is it fair to say that this sort of emergency communications on that day hadn't been worked out in advance? Is that fair?
Yes.
All right, so this was sort of making it up as you go along on that day, not in a critical way, but you're just doing what you need to do to communicate with each other under the circumstances and under the time constraints that you had.
Yes.
All right. And I think clearly, Mr. Sullivan, you'd say that that approach to communications is unacceptable under any Secret Service protection scenario. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
fair?
It's absolutely unacceptable.
All right. Couple quick questions to you all. One of the things about resources, and Mr. Sullivan, I know you've talked about how thin Secret Service is stretched, and I share that view. In fact, Congress passed additional appropriations to help address that. My immediate concern, though, is to get more agents up and running. Hiring new agents, as you pointed out, it takes years for a new agent to be prepared and trained to actually step into the role of protection for the president or other senior officials. Is that fair?
Yes, once an agent is hired, it does take years, literally years, to get him or her up to speed to be assigned to that detail.
One question I was just wondering about, recent retirees, is there a way that, recent retirees could come back who've been trained in this and have experience and, maybe could be immediately available at least till we get through, I would say, the inauguration cycle?
The Secret Service has a retired annuitant program, and there are many retired agents currently working, and they have an exemption so they could collect their salary as well as their annuity.
Is that something that could be accelerated now to get more people into these
The only
roles?
thing they could do is, right now, it's my understanding, there's an age 60 limit. If the Secret Service raised the limit, you may have more people available. But right now, it's my understanding you can't be older than 60 to be a reemployed annuitant.
Okay, and I guess perhaps part of that is for the physicality of the role for people on the scene. But for people providing, for example, advanced leadership and guidance and recommendations, they could step into this role immediately. Would that be fair to say?
They could. They also could step into the role of the protective intelligence investigations, which I think is a critical gap right now that needs to be addressed. We need to be able to investigate threats against the president thoroughly and completely.
I appreciate that. And then lastly, let me end on this with respect to the site selection piece. I think, Lieutenant Harold, you testified that there had been a rally, I guess, in 2020 at the airport in the Butler area?
That's correct.
And that was, in your view, a safer site because it was totally...
It was an active airport, so it was fenced in and restricted. So the entire airport is surrounded by a fence, so it would prevent a lot of unnecessary foot traffic or people driving their cars through. There's multiple entrances to the farm show. There's a back gate, there's a front gate. You can come through the hangars off the airport side. So there's a lot of areas to be able to access that venue. So looking just at site, the airport's more secured.
And just when I stepped onto the Butler site, I went with Chairman Green the first time, the shots came from, I guess as the former president would have been facing, the shots came from the AGR building on the right. But I noticed that there was, I don't know, maybe 10 buildings on the left side of the stage as well, including some kind of rodeo stage or something along those lines. Is there other buildings up there?
There were other buildings on site, and I believe that ESU had members in those, I guess it's the grandstand it's called, at the farm show, so there was LE in those buildings.
And there was also a water tower there too, right?
Yes.
Okay, so from the standpoint of ease of protection, putting protection detail in place, Mr. Sullivan, would it be easier if the fewer rooftops you have, the fewer sites that would provide a possible shooting venue for a sniper or an assailant in this instance? is it better to, is it easier for the Secret Service and safer for the people, not just the candidate, but obviously, as we saw, the deadly consequences on that day, spectators who come to watch? Is it safer to have it maybe at the airport scenario as opposed to the field?
Well, Mr. Ivey, the safest place to have a rally is indoors, where you don't have the long-range threat problem. If the Secret Service were in decisions-making for the campaign sites, we would always recommend it be indoors, any rally.
Fair enough. And then last point, Mr. Chairman, with respect to that, I know we're not on Florida yet, but I will say this, on the site selection piece, and certainly candidates, and I've been one myself, have a right to rest and relaxation. That golf course is a tough venue to provide the type of protection that we're talking about because of the size of it, the access of the roads all the way around it. They're all public access, limited fencing, high, bushes and things alike. Maybe not the best. Maybe there are golf courses that are on military bases, for example, that would be safer, sort of along the lines of how the airport's safer than the fairgrounds. So I hope we can figure out a way for as we move forward with these, especially for a rest and relaxation scenario as opposed to a campaign scenario where there's a First Amendment effort to allow a candidate to reach voters or spectators. I think that's the highest priority. Make it best, candidates should be able to pick whatever they want on that scenario, but maybe the R&R is a different scenario. But with that, I yield back, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of you for your service.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the representative from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I'm going to be moving fast, and Mr. Chairman, let me assure you, we're going to get to the bottom of everything that happened on J13. We're going to determine what happened, when, precisely the timeline, what went right, what went wrong, where were their failures, where was their heroic action. We're going to thoroughly and calmly investigate the entire incident, the attempted assassination of former President Trump, and we're going to provide an excellent report to the American people in December. So we're in the middle of this thing right now, and I have to cover a lot of territory in a very few minutes. Commander Lenz, you're the commander of the entire tactical unit for Butler County. That's a multiple agency unit that's assembled across the county, and you're in command. I just want to clarify that. Did you command and supervise the drone team on the morning of J13 to observe and sanitize and clear the entire property, including the water tower?
We had a private company that offered to fly a drone.
They were under your command?
Correct. Yeah,
Thank
under
you.
my, yep.
And was that sophisticated drone equipment? Or?
As far as I understand it, yes.
Yes, sir. Did you post 2 patrol response units at the water tower for J13?
I did not. I had no actual decision-making as far as the planning goes for where
So
the perimeter people.
was it your understanding that there were 2 patrol response units parked in the vicinity of the water tower on J13?
I do believe at some point there were.
Okay, that's what we're trying to get to. And was the water tower ladder, which is about 25 feet high, was it ever lowered that day?
No.
Thank you very much. Regarding radio communications, in the pre-mission briefing, you were involved extensively in that in the couple of weeks prior to J13. That's my understanding.
Yes.
Thank you. Regarding radio communications with the visiting federal agencies with jurisdictional authority to protect the former president, the Secret Service, did Butler County ESU, your unit, provide particular radios for the Secret Service or set aside radios for the Secret Service?
We did.
You did. Did you personally call the Secret Service counter sniper teams and remind them to pick up their particular radios on the morning of J13?
So I had spoken to them at the walkthrough and offered the radios.
That was on Thursday.
Correct. And then the day of the rally, our sniper team leader, when they did their face-to-face, he reminded them that the radios.
Yes,
were
did they ever pick up those radios?
They did not.
And so those two counter sniper teams for the Secret Service were posted up on roofs. There was the Northern Counter Sniper Team, which ultimately did not take a shot on Crooks because their line of sight was blocked by a couple of trees. I believe then the Southern Counter Sniper Team, which ultimately did fire the killing shot at Crooks. They were up on roofs by themselves, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan, would have been helpful. You said it was absolutely unacceptable for there to not be direct radio communications. Would it have been helpful for the Secret Service to pick up the radios that the Butler County ESU had provided for them and reminded them to pick up?
Absolutely.
Especially up on a roof, being isolated as these counter sniper teams are.
Yes.
They didn't have that radio communication.
No, would have been
Let me
helpful.
clarify that the local Butler County ESU, in command of all the local forces assisting Secret Service that day, attempted to deliver radio communication to the counter sniper teams. My goodness, time rolls quickly. I'd like to jump into shot number 9. Shot number 9, during the interviews with the Secret Service and FBI, they commonly step over shot number 9. They say Crooks fired 8 rounds and then the Secret Service fired the killing shot, shot number 10. But there was a shot number 9 fired, was there not, Mr. Lenz?
There was.
Okay, Commander, I'm gonna quote from the transcribed interview of Aaron Zalapone. That's a tactical SWAT officer under your command that took shot number 9. He was deployed. He heard the radio traffic. He saw the commotion. He left his deployed position and ran into a position where he thought he might be able to get a shot on if there was a shooter up on a roof, somebody on a roof. He said seconds after that is whenever the first 3 shots were fired. So I hear the first 3, crack, crack, crack. And at this point, I'm like, okay, where we at here? I look up, that's when I see Crooks. I got his head, his shoulders. I can see a rifle. At that point, I hear another crack. That's when I start pulling my weapon up. He gets 3 off. As I'm getting my target acquired, I'm getting my red dot up. I can see the gas emit from his barrel, his muzzle. Then right after that, I hear the snap of his 5th shot go off. Then immediately after that, I press one off, and that's when he immediately goes down. When I say goes down, it wasn't like he was ducking to get out of the way. I mean, I know I hit him. Like, there's no doubt about it. He goes down. He kind of jerks to the right, and then he slumps over slowly, and then kind of slowly rolls backward out of my field of view. So at that point, I did not have a second shot. At that point, he tries to recover. Seconds after that, the Secret Service, from a different vantage point, a higher vantage point, takes the killing shot. So my final question, if I may, to the doctor. Are you here with us, Doctor?
Yes, I
Dr.
am.
Goldschmidt. You stated, sir, and I know you're doing your best, you performed the autopsy. I've observed your work. I think it was very professional work, in my opinion. You stated that there was only 1 bullet wound. I accept that you had only 1 observable bullet wound. Are you there, Doctor?
Yes, I am.
Thank
Yes,
you
I
very
am.
much. Could the injuries on Crooks' shoulders have been caused by a combined impact of Butler County ESU shot number 9 striking somewhere in the vicinity of the buttstock of Crooks' rifle and some fragmenting from that impact? Could the injuries on Crooks' shoulders have been caused by a combination of shot number 9 and shot number 10? Is that possible?
No, I don't believe so.
You don't believe it's possible. Does that mean it's possible?
No, it's not possible.
It's not possible. So I respect your testimony, but how would you determine if you removed only 1 fragment of a bullet? The FBI recovered no other bullets, that's our understanding, no other projectiles other than the partial projectile that you recovered from his shoulder. So you don't know where shot number 9 went, did you, Doctor?
Correct. I do
Okay.
not.
So is it not possible, you're saying it's not possible that shot number 9 went all the way through Crooks and you had no way of knowing that because it was in the same wound that was further affected by shot number 10. You're saying that's not possible?
The body, there was no evidence on the body of that occurrence.
There you go, sir. That's different than impossible. Listen, thank you all for testifying today. Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this first very important hearing. We shall do more, and we shall complete our work professionally. Thank you, sir. I yield.
Yes, sir, thank you, and you were correct. We will continue. Now recognize Ranking Member Crow for his comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling this really important hearing. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of the witnesses here today. Your testimony was clear, was concise, was candid, and was very helpful for us in our first phase of the investigation to understand what happened, what didn't happen, what should have happened. You all didn't ask for this, and I know none of you wanted to be in this position, but you have handled yourselves professionally, and for that we thank you. I know you are serving your community, our country. We are proud of that service. We thank you for that service, and this task force will continue with this job of giving answers to the American people that they deserve, and also making sure that this incident, an incident like this, never happens again. So thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Look, I want to thank you all for being here. I live with you. We live in the same place. We experienced the same thing that Saturday. I know how deeply wounded you were after that event, because the first time anybody pointed fingers at anybody, it was at local law enforcement. They didn't do their job. You being here today is a validation of what you did that day, your commitment to that day, and going over and above what you normally would have done. I know a lot of you there were there in 2020 when we did the rally at the Butler Airport. I get that. That time they said there was maybe 50,000 people there. That went off very smoothly, no problem. July 13th was a problem, a huge problem. You guys did everything you were asked to do that day. You stayed your course. You did everything, everything. And I want to thank you for coming here today, that the public can hear what happened that day, and you can answer questions that were very relevant to that. Thank you so much for your commitment. Appreciate it all. Thank you all. Now, without objection, members have 5 days to submit additional materials and written questions for the witnesses to the chair, which will be forwarded to the witnesses. I ask the witnesses to please respond promptly. Now, we'll now pause to allow the witnesses for our second panel to come forward. Thank you. We're going to take about a 10-minute break.
watching on their phone.
That's good. Task Force will come to order. I would like to introduce the witnesses for our second panel. First, we have Representative Eli Crane from Arizona. Rep. Crane enlisted into the Navy to serve our country just a week after the September 11th attacks. 3 out of his 5 wartime deployments were with the Navy SEALs. It's great to have you here, Rep. Crane. Second, we have Representative Corey Mills from Florida. Rep. Mills enlisted in the Army at a young age, serving with the 82nd Airborne Division and Joint Special Operations Command. Both of these men have extensive experience as snipers in our military. They have both visited the site in Butler, where the former president was nearly killed, and have identified potential ways for Secret Service to improve their protection. It's important for the task force to hear from these snipers and learn from their experience, better understand how the Secret Service missed on these key areas of coverage. This is a particularly important, given the fact that former President Trump will be returning to the same site to finish his speech on October the 5th. I talked to both Corey and Eli before this. Rarely in your life do you have a second time to do the right thing after you messed up the first time. Now, this panel will be different than the last. Both of witnesses will be allotted 5 minutes for remarks, and then we will gavel out. I want to now recognize Representative Crane for 5 minutes. Representative, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today as you conduct this very critical hearing. For those of you who don't know, I served in the U.S. Navy from 2001 to 2014, had the opportunity to deploy to Iraq multiple times with SEAL Team 3. One of my qualifications was as a sniper. We are highly trained in various aspects of military operation, weaponry, technology, tactics, and all sorts of mission sets to include executive protection. With that background, it's evident to me that many basic security measures were completely dropped. That being said, you do not have to have a background in special operations to recognize the incompetence and security failures that led to the catastrophic vulnerabilities surrounding President Trump and the crowd that day. I hear from Americans every day in complete disbelief in the wake of 2 assassination attempts in 2.5 months that cannot believe how ineffective our Secret Service has become. There's simply no excuse. I'm glad I can testify today to share some insight into the operational failures of that fateful day. Rep. Mills and I visited Butler, Pennsylvania rally site immediately following the assassination attempt to investigate. I've also visited the site with Homeland Security Chairman Mark Green and my colleagues on the committee. Some of the main challenges facing Secret Service were completely avoidable. For example, we investigated the second-floor window. Secret Service agents and local law enforcement had access to overlooking the roof from where the shooter engaged the former president. I was able to confirm that had anyone stationed in the second story at AGR building come off of their weapon system, moved to the window, and looked out the window during their search to reacquire Thomas Crooks, they would have seen him within 30 to 40 yards of that position. He would have easily been spotted lying on that roof with no camouflage and his rifle. We were able to confirm that former Secret Service Director Cheadle was lying to Congress when she gave us the excuse that the roof was too slanted, too dangerous for Secret Service snipers to take up counter-sniper positions. But as myself and others who went up on that roof, it was not steep at all. Ironically, the positions that Secret Service counter-snipers posted themselves upon were actually far steeper than that roof at the AGR building. Furthermore, Secret Service did not have any of its counter-snipers on a nearby water tower, the tallest structure at the farm show grounds. I knew immediately upon setting foot at that site, and Mr. Chairman, you were there as well, that that's exactly where I would have placed myself as a counter-sniper because of its commanding view over the entire property. Not only would any counter-sniper have been able to easily engage Thomas Crooks from that position that he attempted to assassinate former President Trump, but it is very likely that Thomas Crooks might have decided to abort his mission and go home had we had counter-snipers on that water tower. The thing that we need to understand about security is how important deterrence is. Had Thomas Crooks visually spotted or located counter-snipers with the use of his drone that day, it is very likely that he would recognize that he would have been deterred long before ever getting into that position capable of having a direct line of sight to the podium and to President Trump, and would have possibly aborted his mission. Rep. Mills and I also ranged several other buildings and windows that were well within range for anyone with a desire to assassinate the former president. Upon our investigation that day, we were informed that nobody was posted on nor had conducted any advance work amongst these very choice and accessible firing positions. Rep. Mills and I both concluded within minutes of observation from the same exact positions used by Secret Service counter snipers that this was a horrible venue for a rally, and Secret Service should have done everything possible to dissuade the campaign from hosting it there. To date, we have seen no evidence that Secret Service tried to dissuade the campaign from using the site due to the alarming threat profiles surrounding the site. Though I appreciate the former president's courage and strong desire to rally his supporters, I strongly suggest that he and his campaign avoid this site on October 5th and in the future, which leads me to my most concerning assessment now of both assassination attempts on the former president. I cannot be more clear. To this point, we have been extremely lucky. Whether either of these individuals were working in coordination with other groups, organizations, or nation states who desired to kill the former president, none of the individuals attempting to kill the president have been professionals. I can tell you that with authority by the weaponry and the gear they used, as well as the fact that Thomas Crooks took a headshot. I can tell you from experience that most snipers are trained to take center mass torso shots, if possible, for the very exact reason that we saw him miss a headshot on July 13th. I can also tell by examining Ryan Ruth's final firing position on the fence line of the golf course that he too was not a professional. No trained sniper, no trained assassin would have set up their final firing position the way he did. We are trained to make absolute sure that nothing on our person or in the vicinity of where we are located and going to take our final shots, that anything stands out from the environment we are in. You could see those large bags holding ballistic plates on the fence, which would easily catch the eye of any trained security agent. He also stuck his barrel through the fence instead of cutting what we call a loophole in it so that he could stay back in the shadows, allowing his concealment. I want to reiterate, to date, these individuals that have tried to assassinate former President Trump are not professionals. What is going to happen, Mr. Chairman, when the president of Iran, China, Russia, or any other country or group who does not want to see President Trump come back into office send professionals? What is going to happen next time if there is a 10-man Hezbollah team, snipers, assaulters, and drone operators launching coordinated and overlapping assassination attempt on the president? I think we can all see by now that their likelihood of success would be tremendous. My suggestion to the former president and to his campaign is that he beef up his private security detail of individuals who are loyal to him and not burdened by the bureaucracy and culture of an organization that many of us used to hold in very high esteem. The reason for this is so they can plug holes that Secret Service continues to leave and make sure they are not putting him in vulnerable situations. It is important that these investigations and oversight continue to make sure that in the coming days, weeks, and months, and even years, that this is no longer a regular occurrence and not even a possibility. I want to challenge this task force to continue doing the great work that they are doing here today, and I also want to challenge them to have enough courage to think outside the box, challenge the mainstream narratives, and be willing to investigate every theory regardless of how conspiratorial others might claim them to be. There is a concern from the American people that this task force will be like most investigations in Washington, D.C. that lead to zero accountability and transparency and simply call for money for an organization that desperately needs reforms at its core. I'd like to again thank the chairman and my colleagues on this task force who are doing great work and the witnesses giving their time and knowledge to help uncover the truth and bring all facts to light.
Thank you, Mr. Crane. I tell you, we accept the challenge. When we're done with this, the American people are going to have faith and trust in everything that we've done, the confidence that we did what we were supposed to do, what we were tasked to do. So I thank you so much for being here. You all have kept that standard up. Now recognize Representative Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to first take a moment just to correct the record that my actual time as a designated defensive marksman and counter sniper was as a contractor with the U.S. State Department on a protective detail, not as a military sniper. While I was honored to serve as a combat veteran with the 82nd Airborne Division, I don't hold that permissibility in that billet. I want to talk today a little bit about what took place, but also what I see as the actual perimeter failures that has continued to be a recurring issue, whether that be in Butler, PA, or whether it be the most recent assassination attempt in Florida. But before I do that, I also want to take a moment just to recognize the loss of Corey Competore. His family deserves to continue to have the accountability research and also investigation into what actually caused the death of a father, a husband, and a family member. My thoughts and prayers remain with Corey Competore's family. I also want to look at what our findings have been, as both myself and my colleague and really close friend, Rep. Crane, has found. It is clear that Butler County, PA, as well as for the ESU teams and the Secret Service, had a failure in their overall coordination. That the perimeter establishment and the actual ownership belongs to that of the Secret Service, as well as for the failures on that day of July 13th in Butler, PA. We realize, as it's been mentioned earlier, that there was a breakdown in not only the misuse of any compatible communication capabilities, but also a lack of a joint operations center that could have allowed for each of the individual units to be able to communicate in a more efficient fashion that would have led to a faster response element. We also know that while there could have been potential drone capabilities that was being utilized, that the Secret Service themselves had actually refused to utilize those for their benefits, which also could have helped the counter snipers who were sitting in their positions. There was also a lack of coordination when it came to who was actually going to take over the position on the AGR building, where Butler understood the idea that it was the Secret Service who was responsible for the positioning, but yet the Secret Service failed to actually show up to the morning coordination meeting. While all of these repeated perimeter failures, whether it be the 150-meter shot that was taken by Thomas Crooks or the potential assailant that was looking at a 500-yard distance from Florida, the thing that we've established is that no one is looking at what is happening and going on with regards to the Secret Service's cultural issues. This is not a budgetary issue, and I want it to be clear that we cannot treat this as DC has continued to treat things, where we throw money at problems in hopes that it's actually going to cause that to be a solution. This breaks it down into three simple things. One is poor leadership of the United States Secret Service, whether that be under Director Cheadle or whether that be under Rowe. To quote Dan Bongino, who is actually a former Secret Service agent, he said that he does not feel any safer or better now than he did under Cheadle, having Rowe in the helm. I think leadership, as we can all admit to, whether it be in the military, the police force, or whether it be here in the House, leadership is one of the things that we must rely upon heavily, and there is a crisis in leadership. I also want to look at the fact that there is a prioritization across not just our military, but other departments and agencies to prioritize diversity, equity, inclusion under DEI, the meritocracy and readiness of our actual capabilities on the ground. But the further thing that I think is needing to be explored is the doctrine itself that is being utilized by the U.S. Secret Service. For too long, they've continued to go under a very specific and very understandable thing where whatever your title is that you hold results in the amount of resources and assets that are being allocated. This is a failure by any of us who understand security, or anyone who's even got a basic knowledge of security, that you must conduct the necessary threat analysis to determine the risk management matrix that then determines what the assets and resources that should be allocated. This is not as simple as saying that you're a former president and therefore there is a one-size-fits-all for Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, President Bush, or former President Donald J. Trump. We must acknowledge the fact that what we're looking at now is also the fact that so much time has passed and so much of the actual potential evidence has been destroyed or put away, that purposeful intent is now indistinguishable from criminal negligence. Having laid in the actual position where Thomas Crooks took the shot above and upon the AGR building, as well as having sat with Rep. Crane and ranged the position from the counter sniper teams where the alleged shot was taking place, this is something that should have been preventable and should have been known to the counter sniper teams. I want to also point out the fact that, as Rep. Crane discussed, I think that until the actual problem and the solution can be found for the Secret Service with the 3 key areas that I've talked about, that a private security detail who does not have any political agenda or affiliation to protect the president is what my recommendation would be, to ensure that the inner core is basically protected at all times, utilizing his available Secret Service assets and resources to be pushed out further to allow that perimeter failure to be completed. I want to thank the task force for giving me the opportunity to actually testify before you. And I want to point out that when we're looking at the map that's behind you, Mr. Chairman, that it is not just the AGR building 150 yards away approximately that was the issue, but even if you look directly to the 12 o'clock of the stage, you have the Kubota dealership, which is only within about a 400-yard shot placement, which Rep. Crane and many snipers and counter snipers can tell you is a very feasible shot. When speaking to the Kubota dealer, we noted the fact that not a single Secret Service or local law enforcement agent had ever talked to that dealership to ask them whether or not they could put any snipers on the rooftop or whether or not they could actually utilize that as an overwatch position. If you look to what would be from my vantage point right now, which is the 3 o'clock, which would be the 9 o'clock for the president, that was the area that was actually the 3rd counter sniper team that one of our whistleblowers, Ben Schaefer, had talked about from his vantage point and being able to see Thomas Crooks at an earlier time. Mr. Chairman, I point these things out to the committee, and again, to echo my good friend Representative Crane, I challenge you to continue to go forward and to not be feared away from the idea of being labeled a conspiracist by looking into every possible outcome, being able to look at every possible provided video, listen to every single testimony of each individual whistleblower. But I also pledge my continued support for the task force, as does Rep. Crane, to provide information, intel, and any of our findings to help further this investigation. While it is an independent investigation, I want you to know that it is not exclusive of the efforts in which you are taking, and that we are here to work together to try and find a solution to improve our Secret Service and to guarantee the protection of not just President Donald J. Trump, but any of the actual nominees on either side of the aisle. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
I want to thank you both. Now, we have put the picture of that whole area. One of the recurring questions was the perimeter where it should be? Now, you two were both there. I know you were both up on the roof of AGR. I've been in constant conversation with the people who run the AGR. They didn't know on July 13th that their whole area was something that was going to be just overrun with people. So the question was, and to me it's always the same thing, every time there's a failure you look at, it's the failure to prepare that causes the failure, ultimately. You two, with your expertise and having been there and both being on that roof, when I first walked on the, not when I first walked on the grounds, but whenever Eli and I walked on the grounds when Homeland was there, the first thing Eli said to me as we started to go across the open area is, who was in the water tower? What sniper was in the water tower? And I said, you know what, I have no idea that there was anybody in the water tower. As you've pointed out, and I've heard too many times, that the reason we didn't have people on the roof of the AGR, it was too hot that day. Well, it wasn't too hot for Thomas Crooks. The fact that we weren't there allowed him to be there. Now, as I said earlier when we opened the whole conversation, we are going to have a second chance to do the right thing and correct the failures of July 13th. The president has decided that he is going back to this site. And I think we know him well enough. He defies any type of logic when it comes to, sir, we're concerned about your safety. And his answer is always the same thing. I'm committed to serving the people of this country. Nobody puts themselves in that position that I've ever been around before. You all served that way, but to me it's astounding that this gentleman is ready to go back to a place where he almost lost his life. I don't think my wife would allow me to do that. Apparently his family, and they've gone through a lot, are going forward with this. But I want you to, because of your expertise, because Eli was the first one to say that. Who was on the water tower? Where was the perimeter? Who tried to put that whole game together? And we found from our first panel today, there was very little coordination. They couldn't talk to each other. They didn't have the ability to communicate. So from the standpoint that you've all been in and looking at where we are, and so everybody understands this as I look at this, this is the AGR building. The water tower is right here. The president was down here. So where should the perimeter have been? Because apparently they thought it was here. That's what was set up, because we had people in this area. We didn't have anybody back here, not from Secret Service. We did have private law enforcement. This whole area was under construction. There was no easy way in or easy way out of this site. On that day, everything that could go wrong apparently went wrong. Going forward, October 5th, where should the perimeter be?
Mr. Chairman, I'll tell you that any counter sniper, or anyone from the military can tell you that the high ground and the highest vantage point is where you want to be. The thing that Eli and I had talked about, Representative Crane, when we looked at the water tower, we actually walked over and tried to view whether or not it was even accessible to begin with. But what I had also noticed is that right behind the water tower was a very well manicured cut path that goes through the woods all the way down to the intersection that intersects between where the entrance to the fairground was and the AGR building's main street. Very permissible without any magnetometers or any of the actual capabilities of security that would have actually allowed someone to go in there basically unfettered. In my personal opinion, when you establish the perimeter, you look at what actual risks exist. The Kubota dealership is obviously somewhere that I would have actually had someone stationed to ensure they couldn't access the building. The AGR building would have been a vantage point that I would certainly have looked at 150 yards. Also to the 9 o'clock of the stage, there was a tremendous amount of multiple buildings and structures who also had a vantage point, direct line of sight to the stage itself. But you would have essentially have looked at what are the actual capabilities of a professional shooter. And I want to echo one thing, if I may, Mr. Chairman, by Representative Crane. When we talk about the fact that not even the risk of an actual trained sniper or someone who has an understanding of long-range distance shooting, but an actual assault team who could have very easily, that fence line that you're pointing at for the AGR building is approximately 100 yards direct line of sight to the stage with no blockage in either the visual or any additional security with an actual screening or anything like that. So you could have had a guy walk up, or a team of individuals, with a bag with an assault rifle or other capabilities who could have easily have come to that line. And Eli and I have discussed this with also Eric Prince. They could have basically done a 5-man, 7-man, 10-man line right there to have opened fire with assault weapons and created a kill box right there on top of that stage. And you're talking 100 yards. That's what most people utilize as their original dope, which is their original 0 for their rifles. So very capable for almost any rifle, and you actually have some special operations teams who do very well with a pistol at even 100. So the fact is that all of the AGR building should have been secured. They should have had full-time watch on that road that leads into the AGR building, which, as you know, comes into the main area and then loops around to a back parking lot. I would have had a law enforcement officer, a Secret Service agent, checking every single person who was parking there to ensure that they were an employee of AGR and not like the white van or others who were able to be permitted into there with complete access, not knowing what was capable. But also, let's note one thing that we haven't mentioned here, which is these sophisticated explosive devices that was also found. This is what also Representative Crane and I talked about was problematic, because even some of the EOD teams talked about the sophistication of this device, which makes me also look further into the fact that Thomas Crooks was not acting alone. And a multi-channel detonator or transmitter is a pretty sophisticated thing that you don't just go ahead and find online. So there's more that needs to be uncovered, but I would tell you without unequivocally, and I'll let my colleague also determine whether he feels the same, the entire AGR perimeter, a positioning at the Kubota dealership to the 12 o'clock of the stage, as well as for the outlying buildings to the 9 o'clock of the stage, which were multiple buildings, should have all been covered and should have all have ensured that there was no advantage point to get to the president for line of sight.
Mr. Crane, any additional?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think one of the things that I said in my opening statement needs to be said again. When you look at this site and all the threat profiles that surround this site, sir, I don't think the event should have ever been held there. There's just way too many buildings, rooftops, windows, trees that a potential assassin could have posted themselves up in, so I think that's number one. As far as when you talk about some of your more conventional assassination attempts with long-range rifles, most of your snipers, counter-snipers who have any legitimate training whatsoever are more than capable out far past 1,000 yards. But let's just say we put that perimeter at 1,000 yards. That's one thing to consider. But the other thing I think that's important to point out, sir, is that modern warfare has changed dramatically, and we need look no further than some of the warfare going on with Ukraine and Russia right now. One of the biggest threats to the president, and this is why I keep talking about the fact that nobody that has attempted to assassinate the president has been a professional. But with drone warfare, sir, attacks could be launched at any president, any candidate from miles away. And if we can't stop a 20-year-old kid with no military experience who gets within 150 yards of the president with an AR-15 and then gets off several shots at the president, I have very little faith that we'd be able to stop a coordinated drone attack along with assault teams and snipers. And so that's one of the things that I want to continue to harp on. One of the things Dan Bongino told us, Mr. Chairman, is that the Secret Service, while he was there, was allergic to innovation. They were allergic to, any attempt to keep, their security systems appropriate and relative to the threats that modern warfare present. Dan Bongino even said that it took them decades, sir, to even start using slings on their primary weapons. Anybody who's ever, been in law enforcement on a SWAT team or in the military that has a primary and a secondary weapon knows that if you don't have a sling, sir, and you have to transition to your secondary weapon, what are you going to do with that gun? You're just going to throw it on the ground or give it to somebody? What if you have to climb a ladder? What if you have to do prisoner handling? And so if it took the Secret Service decades to even implement such basic, gear transformations, it's very concerning that they're going to be able to handle some of these modern threats that are now very likely as modern warfare has adapted.
No, thank you. I'm aware of this whole area for trying to figure out where I am in life. About 60-some years, I know this area. As you just pointed out, and we've talked about before, one of my main concerns when I found out this was going to be the place, I said, this is going to be almost impossible for safety and security. At this moment, though, I want to turn around and have Ms. Laura Lee, why don't you take 5 minutes to ask our panel the questions you want to ask? What?
Well, I just want to thank you both so much for being here. Your unique backgrounds and your insight about this subject matter is very valuable to us, and I appreciate you taking the time to participate in our hearing. I know you both have had an opportunity to cover in your statements some of the key things that you think are important for both the public and the committee to understand about the incident in Butler. Are there other things in particular areas of inquiry that you want to see this committee utilizing going forward, particular witnesses you think that we should have? Any thoughts you have about what and whom we should be bringing in to testify?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've seen online, and let me be clear when I say this, guys, so much of any investigation, I think, needs to be open-minded and willing to look at anything and everything that, even if it might be outside the official narrative. Even if you talk to somebody and find out that the evidence that they're presenting, might not hold water, might lack credibility, I think that's extremely important. One of the videos that I've seen online is from a gentleman named John Colin, who talks about the possibility of a second shooter, and he shows a video, Ms. Lee, where in this video he shows a bullet traveling down a path and the disruption that round supposedly makes, and then flies into one of the stadium fence railings. That shows that it would have been very, very difficult for that round to travel the path that it did had it come from Thomas Crooks. I think that you need to bring this gentleman in, see his evidence, and if you don't think it holds water, then you need to make that assessment. But that was one of the things I said in my opening testimony. Far too often, especially as representatives, we're scared that if we investigate something that others are saying might be conspiratorial, then that might defame us or give us a lack of credibility. But I think any investigation out there that's worth its salt will look at any theory and then try and disprove, debunk it, or see if it holds water and run with it. So John Cullen is somebody I think you guys should bring in here and look at the video evidence that he has of a bullet traveling, in a trajectory and a path that would not have been able to come from Thomas Crooks.
And I'd like to just echo this. The one thing that doesn't lie is bullet trajectory and also the coefficients that it carries. And I think that Eli and I had talked about this prior to the hearing, but also multiple times about John Cullen's video that does show, if you look at people who were injured and the actual line of sight and where it was to the stage, just kind of what the possibilities were and how many shots were truly taken. The other thing that I would like us to continue to look at within this committee is that what are the overall, while we can try and talk about threat analysis, what are the things, and as Representative Crane had pointed out, even drone capabilities, knowing how sophisticated things have gotten, what are we missing with regards to risk management and mitigation strategies that exist now that didn't exist 20, 30 years ago, where they've not updated their training platform and portfolio to incorporate? What type of counter-drone capabilities do we have? What do we have as far as an understanding of what types of things we can enact immediately to try and get an improvement upon perimeter security layouts? And also even our communication capabilities. We found that even the counter-snipers were utilizing text messaging as one of the means of communication, knowing that, Eli and I can tell you, you have to come off the rifle or come off the scope if you're a spotter in order to try and text someone information and details. When they tried to say that we may not have had any type of good Wi-Fi or comms or internet, the Starlink system that we utilize in Ukraine and other areas has been proven to be something that can not only be set up immediately, but could be utilized and incorporated into the team's overall equipments. And so I think that, as Eli Crane talked about, as Dan Bongino's talked about, a lack of willingness of the Secret Service to evolve to the incoming threats, a lack of willingness to have new equipment that is the most modern, updated, and efficient, I think is going to lead to further attacks. But we also have to start looking at the adversarial challenges when it comes to Iran, who, as you know, the Ayatollah himself recently just posted a video that was alluding to the fact that they want to try another assassination, saying that revenge is imminent, even showing the Mar-a-Lago estates and the president playing golf. We need to take these threats very seriously, especially when we look at things like Mershan, who's the 46-year-old Pakistani who flew to Iran for a series of days, then to Houston, Texas, was stopped in Houston, Texas, and questioned by the FBI. And again, this is something I would ask the committee, and I know the FBI has been stonewalling and preventing information, but potentially subpoena and possible contempt. We have to acknowledge the fact, what was the actual answers that this individual provided, knowing he was already on a terrorist watch list, knowing that he just came from Iran, that would allow him to be permitted to enter into the United States and then found with a plot to not only assassinate the president, but also 35 other elected officials. I think that this is really getting to the crux of the fact that we don't have the security, and there's a false sense of security that's been developed at this point.
Well, thank you both. I certainly appreciate your thoughts and perspective, and can certainly attest that both myself and the chairman and all of the other members of the committee are committed to ensuring that we review and investigate all of the relevant theories, that we're receiving input from members of Congress, from the American public, as well as those who were there, who are the actual day of witnesses of these events. So I know that we will continue in that path forward and appreciate your input.
Thank the gentlelady. Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank my colleagues and veteran brothers, Eli and Corey, for being here today. You have my commitment, each of you, to have candid and private conversations as we continue our investigations. I especially want to meet with you regarding your trajectory studies. I've conducted my own and found that some of the digital recreations for trajectory data doesn't include some of the pretty extreme terrain variances of elevation versus depression of the AGR complex versus the actual stage area. So I'm looking forward to working with you both on that. Let's try to come to a conclusion that we can say, okay, this is what the complete truth is, because we must investigate every potential theory. I don't consider anything to be a conspiracy theory. There are theories of what happened that day, and they all deserve complete, calm, thorough investigation. So you each have my commitment to work with you on that, and I know that this task force is committed to determining ultimately the same thing you gentlemen are, which is a complete and full reveal of truth to the American people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank my colleagues for being here today.
Thank you, sir. So I want to thank both of you for being here. You know, some of the things you pointed out, the one thing that this task force does have, the subpoena power, and when you talk about people slow walking you and people not answering questions completely, that's our job to say, you know what, I understand you don't want to answer that question, but I want you to understand that we are going to be sure that you answer that question. The American people deserve to know the truth. I keep hearing they're not strong enough to stand it. They are strong enough to stand it, and if not now, when? I believe we are at a very dangerous time. A very, very dangerous time, and we have our eyes closed and our ears plugged saying, no, that's not happening. It is happening, and it's very dangerous. I want to thank both of you for your expertise. I want to thank both of you for your courage to come forward and bring that information out. I also want to thank the task force that has been working tirelessly and will continue to work tirelessly until we get to the end. But when we get to the end, it will be a finished piece of work, one that is complete in every way, that we will have exhausted everything we can do to get to the truth and make sure that the American people have the faith, the trust, and the confidence that they need to have in our agencies. Thank you both for being here, and without objection, the committee is adjourned.